My name is Kathy Knight McConnell. I am a published author. My first book was a biography of Curtis Knight titled Curtis Knight Living in the Shadow of Jimi Hendrix, and I am currently working on a book tentatively titled Connections, Morgellons, The Mystery Hum, Geoengineering, and Electromagnetic Energy Waves. Let me start out by saying that Jesus Christ is my Lord and Savior, and all of my research is colored by my faith in Him. I am one of what is now estimated at being more than 1 million sufferers of Morgellons disease worldwide. I have done countless hours of research on Morgellons over the past nearly 5 years. I have used myself as a case study and also spoken to hundreds, if not thousands, of Morgellons victims worldwide, from all walks of life, through various groups I belong to, and have spoken to quite a few of them on the telephone as well. Due to all of the research I have done, I have come to believe that Morgellons is a bioweapon, and the powers that be are waging a purposeful biowarfare on humanity. Our bodies are being bioformed, and our environment is being terraformed with fallen angel and demonically inspired technologies, resulting in spiritual as well as physical consequences. The first thing to realize is that Morgellons is a syndrome, not a single disease. It is a very complex topic that has been taking a lot of time and effort by a lot of people to sort out. There are many researchers focused on one or another aspect of it, but it seems to be compartmentalized, and so it is nearly impossible to diagnose. There is no magic bullet cure for this disease, although there are some who claim to have been cured or to have discovered a cure, which I have good reason to question. It is possible to relieve the symptoms, repair damaged cells, and regain enough health to live a much more normal life. It requires diligence, perseverance, and maintenance to protect from reinfection. While I am pretty much free of the symptoms at this time, I have been reinfected by breathing in the fibers while doing spring cleaning and raising the dust, but I recovered quickly due to my protocol and rebuilt immune system. Shaking hands with someone who is infected can cause reinfection to occur, so it is definitely transmissible by touch and through the air. The main problem I see is that even if people succeed in becoming symptom-free for a time, it appears to be inevitable that victims will eventually become reinfected. It is my opinion the key to regaining health is in rebuilding the immune system. This insidious disease syndrome is not just a matter of fibers growing through the skin and extremely painful lesions that never seem to heal. It is neurosystemic and can cross the blood-brain barrier. This is due to the fact that nanotube fibers, heavy metals, weaponized mycoplasma, and nanotechnology fill our atmosphere thanks to massive geoengineering programs, otherwise known as chemtrails. Geoengineering is only a part of the problem. It is also being transmitted and activated by genetically modified organisms and foods, bacteria, viruses, fungi, GMOs, vaccinations containing mycoplasma, nagalase that blocks GCMAF in the body, mercury, and cancer-causing agents in polio vaccines, fluoride in water, EMF or electromagnetic frequency waves, smart meters, synthetic DNA, and other manufactured synthetics, etc. Some of it is purposeful, and some is an accidental side effect. Smart meters, both electric and gas, emit extremely high RF radio frequency microwave radiation, which is also an activator of Morgellons. In his January 29, 2013 court testimony, Joshua Hart of StopSmartMeters.org said that smart meters can cause adverse biological effects, and RF sensitivity can be a result of instant exposure to smart meters or over time. Many people have been physically, mentally, and psychologically ill from having a close proximity within 20 to 30 feet of a smart meter. Draining of energy, headaches, hives, or possibly Morgellons lesions, vertigo, or loss of balance, loss of visual acuity, heart palpitations, loss of sleep and concentration, trouble breathing, leading to loss of homes, jobs, businesses, etc., ringing in the ears, clicking sounds, I get these on occasion, sinuses swell shut, nosebleeds, nausea, and joint pain. Nuclear scientist David Hirsch has warned that wireless smart meters emit 100 times more radiation than cell phones. Morgellons syndrome collapses our immune systems and makes us vulnerable to any opportunistic pathogens and co-infections that are in our immediate environments, picked up from others, from who knows where they have been, and attracts insects to lay eggs, myiasis in our bodies due to insect vector pheromones. At the same time, it is killing our cells from within. It is really a cocktail mix of toxic ingredients, and I believe that those people who are looking forward to a transhumanistic future are expected to assimilate all of these toxins into their bodies to help bring about the changes espoused by people like Ray Kurzweil to move on to the planned singularity. Only those people whose bodies are trying to reject it are manifesting the outward symptoms of Morgellons. For those who don't assimilate these toxins, it becomes a long, slow deterioration of the body and eventually leads to a shutdown, resulting in death or suicide. I know a lot of people who are Christians who have come down with Morgellons, and there are several groups of people on Facebook who have banded together to pray and share what information they are able to find to help each other. It doesn't matter what you believe, Christian or non-Christian, it will wreak havoc on your immune system and destroy the cells from within. There is a video on YouTube by a laboratory researcher named Belle Van Eden, who has disappeared since putting out this information, titled Morgellons is Silent Superbug and Fiber Disease. It is full of microscopic images and analysis. Quoting from the video, he says, quote, "A silent acting superbug has been identified in this laboratory. The microorganism is a synthetic model organism based on quorum sensing, cell-to-cell communication, robotic-like behavior assembly. The organism is a stray target of a proteome research center. Target intended for medical, industrial, and military type spin of polymer bipolar cellulose-like filament. A Genesis Vibrio-like element biosensor related cell line protein crystal." If you watch this 12.5-minute video, you can see that it is filled with images from a scanning electron microscope in the lab, including microcrystalline structures, filaments, and a black goo also shows up. He describes it further as having multiple activity giant nucleated cells with random combinations forming pigmented filaments. He also found what he called a Genesis fly-like entity in the sample, like a form of myiasis but formed from inside of the body. Skizit Gesture has a video on YouTube that goes much deeper into the topic of how scientists have used insect vectors to change DNA, titled MHS19, Patented Morgellons Insect Hormone Ecdysone Switches Disease. I would highly recommend watching all of her videos on Morgellons disease. They are mind-blowing. Belle Van Eden also made this thought-provoking statement, quote, "A pact depending on consensus-based decision-making by members of the Western Alliance may finally relate to remarkable profit-making and the global spread of systemic disease caused by man-made disaster." Getting back to the disease itself, he further said, paraphrased, "It has a preference for the hair follicle with stem cell related activity, cuticle sensor, and sensor genesis, and shows a human hair with a sensing filament attached as well as fibers coming out of the skin." He says it is sarcoidosis-like and also oncholysis. He describes it as insect bite-like. His preliminary conclusion states, quote, "Base architecture represents a cyanobacterium, CBL, fused with a trypanosoma-like element. This base architecture will differentiate in a set commensal resembling microorganisms. Differentiation equals cell specialization. Multilineage differentiation is fact. Elements are reciprocal in action. Quorum sensing is a stem cell-like property. Infection with this element mimics protothesis and trypanosomiasis. The agent constitutes foreign adaptive protein. Protein can mimic DNA. Association with multinucleated giant cell type Langerhans, nucleolated cytokine, and epithelial cell is rational. Multiple dominant gene expression is associated with differential Lepidoptera and Diptera, marine-related species, bird-like species, mammal-like species, and higher primate. Prognosis is, quoting him, host-pathogen interaction. Infection with this synthetic element is acute, persisting, and latent. General characteristic, slowly progressive and invasive. Mode of transmission, air, water, and vector-borne. Infection may directly or indirectly become associated with differential protothesis, trypanosomiasis, tissue-replacing property, calcification, and erosion. Therapy-resistant skin disease, sarcoidosis, irritable bowel syndrome, peripheral neuropathy, microcirculation, vascular-related disease, fibromyalgia, sclerotic process, granulomatous process, amyloidosis-like process, joint pain, infection of the urogenital tract, neurogenic condition, involvement of the CNS, conjunctivitis, infestation of the vitreous, otitis, sinitis, autoimmune-related disease, and nosocomial infection. Prolonged contact with this type element could become associated with neurodegenerative disease, factor in cancerous-like process, congenital disease. While Bell Van Eden doesn't call it Morgellons, it is the same disease, and the symptoms are manifesting the same in Morgellons sufferers. You can also see why it is difficult to diagnose and treat this. Different researchers are focusing narrowly on small parts of the syndrome, such as on Lyme disease, which was also weaponized by scientists on Plum Island in New York. If you want more information on that, check out a book titled Lab 257, The Disturbing Story of the Government's Secret Germ Laboratory by Michael C. Carroll. It's a real eye-opener. Slime mold or cyanobacteria from deep sea vents, but few of them see all of the varying elements of this huge puzzle of a syndrome as thoroughly as Bell Van Eden has done. And yet, there are still other pieces that turn up here and there. Not all people have all characteristics, and there may be more genetic markers that are not as overt as those we have found. There appears to be some evidence collected by researchers that points to a genetic predisposition for the outbreaks of lesions and extreme illness due to an immune response which is attempting to reject the foreign Morgellons pathogens, but has been so weakened that it can't do the task on its own. Morgellons appears to have been designed to reinvent itself every time it is acted upon, and that leads to an endless cycle of aggression. Trying to rid yourself with medications can lead to retaliation by mutation from the pathogens. As one researcher has put this regarding Morgellons pathogens, it can overcome. There are said to be 6 known genetic markers identified in Morgellons victims which are disproportionate with the known statistics, according to Jan Smith's research. The severity of the symptoms may relate directly to the number of markers each person has. 1. An Rh-negative blood factor in family genetics. Predisposition, but not all sufferers are Rh-negative. 2. Northern European ancestry, but again, not all sufferers are of this ancestry. 3. a genetic haplogroup of U5, or Ursula 5. U5 is the most ancient DNA in Europe, 50,000 to 60,500 years according to genetic research, although I highly doubt that it was all that long ago. 4. A duplication trisomy of 1q42, 11, q42, 12, from which I have read can be either an extra gene added or a gene deleted in the first chromosome, which can cause genetic mutations such as dwarfism. According to a hidden page now removed on the National Institute of Health webpage, that page also stated that additional information on this disease may be available from the Genetic and Rare Diseases Information Center, and also said that the Information Center is supported by the Office of Rare Diseases in partnership with the National Human Genomic Research Institute, both of the National Institutes of Health. The phone numbers and email were also provided. It specifically mentioned Morgellons as a disease and included a note to learn more or to report suspected cases. Call the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. Morgellons information and voicemail line number given was 404-718-1199. Number 5, blue, green, or hazel eyes. But then again, not all have those colors. My eyes are brown. 6, presence of other genetic abnormalities. Two things appear to be at work in the majority of people who are reporting symptoms, which are that it has been reported that 4/5 of all Morgellons sufferers are Rh negative, and that most of us have DNA traceable to Ursula 5 bloodlines, or U5, which is in Western Europe, meaning that for the most part, this bloodline has little to no Neanderthal DNA, and most do not have the rhesus monkey gene. I'm not sure what it means, and I am still tracking the information. The fact is that there are people outside of those DNA and blood groups who are also getting it, although at seemingly smaller percentages. It may be that we are all getting the fibers, but some are assimilating them and others are rejecting them, which is causing the fibers to try to exit the body. Either way, it is not natural. I personally have not had my DNA tested, partly because the cost is too high for me at this time, and partly because if the Illuminati are in fact searching for specific DNA strains in all of the stop and search programs reported around the U.S., I did not have any intention of alerting them to what haplogroup I might belong to. Unfortunately, earlier in 2016, we had a home invasion and robbery. The police detectives took my DNA to compare to samples they collected to try and identify the perpetrator. They later claimed they did not find any DNA other than mine. So now they have it. If my circumstances change to where I can afford it, I might very well get it traced out of curiosity. What I do know is that my family, on my father's side, originated in Europe in the area of Bavaria that used to be known as French Lorraine. His mother was Swiss, and his father was part German and part Dutch. On my mother's side, I have Irish and German roots, so it is not impossible that I might be of the Ursula 5 haplogroup, even though I have brown eyes, not blue or green. It is interesting to note that the Mormons have been keeping a genealogy database in Utah of all of the genetic samples they can collect, and they are only about 23 miles away from the NSA data center. On their website, the Mormons say they have more than 4,500 family history centers operated around the world by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and they claim, quote, the fabric of humanity is being woven together as volunteers compile and record important dates and information about those who have died. The church's website, FamilySearch.org, currently holds over 3 billion records and grows daily. Ancestry.com was also started by Mormons, although it was sold to an investment firm. They claim to be unaffiliated, but Ancestry.com and FamilySearch.org, an LDS church subsidiary, perform very similar functions and are co-located in Provo, Utah, and have similar technology bases. Haplogroups are tracked by mitochondrial DNA, mtDNA. Research by Dr. Garth Nicholson and Dr. Don Scott shows that weaponized mycoplasma destroys the mitochondria inside the cells, human and animal. This mitochondria is used to determine genealogy. I will have more to say on weaponized mycoplasma. Genealogists say that the mtDNA mitochondrial haplogroup U5 is the oldest bloodline that is still human or Homo sapien rather than Neanderthal or some other subgroup. Dr. Hildegard Staninger describes it as the Viking bloodline and says that it is the most susceptible to getting Morgellons and that Rh-negative blood is the most common to get it. According to geneticists, the presence of haplogroup U5 in Europe predates the expansion of agriculture in Europe. Brian Sykes' book, The Seven Daughters of Eve, says it shows up 45 to 50,000 years ago in Delphi, Greece, and named the originator of haplogroup U5 Ursula. Genetic tracing shows that U5 first came out of Africa into Europe and showed up in Delphi and Spain around 50,000 years ago. According to family tree DNA, haplogroup U5 and its subclades are most common in Sami, Finns, and Estonians, but it is spread widely at lower levels throughout Europe. U5 is found also in small frequencies and at much lower diversity in the Near East, suggesting back migration of people from Northern Europe to the south and are mainly found in Northwest Europe. It has also been suggested that individuals bearing subclades of this haplogroup were part of the initial expansion, tracking the retreat of ice sheets from Europe. Mainstream medicine has little patience or understanding for what it takes to treat the syndrome, and there are no medical codes to classify it for insurance coverage. So they try to categorize it as DOP, or delusions of parapsychosis, and dismiss the patient with antidepressants, or recommend a psychiatrist instead of taking the initiative to treat the patient. Some do prescribe antibiotics to treat symptoms, but attacking a disease that destroys the immune system with antibiotics that break down the immune system is counterproductive in my opinion. Being allergic to antibiotics, as I have become over time, completely shuts down that avenue, and yet I am doing extremely well without them. The pharmaceutical industry, pharmakia, holds mankind in bondage through medications. Just look hard at all of the television ads for medications. They all have severe warnings of side effects that in many instances are worse than the malady they are supposed to treat. Dr. Randy Wymore wrote in 2007, quote, "There is no clear and simple diagnostic test yet to confirm or rule out Morgellons. Still, 100% of the patients that were felt to genuinely have Morgellons disease have large microscopic to small macroscopic fibers visible under their outer layer of skin. These fibers are not associated with scabs or open lesions, nor are they under scarred tissue. The idea that Morgellons fibers are mere fuzz and lint simply sticking to the lesions and scabs is not possible based on the observations that were just described. These fibers are under normal appearing areas of skin. In contrast, such fibers have never been observed in even one person who does not claim to have Morgellons." Dr. Wymore also stated, however, a more thorough analysis of the fibers performed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation Forensics Laboratory has revealed that the fibers do not resemble textiles or any other man-made substance. In fact, the fibers are virtually indestructible by heat or chemical means, making analysis difficult by conventional methods. This is from Personal Communication from Randy Wymore, May 4, 2009, from Savely and Stricker in 2010. From an unattributed report, laboratory analysis of the fibers was done by several contract labs, AMDL Inc., ACS Inc., MIT, and Lambda Solutions Inc. Results received from February 5, 2007 subject samples of unknown fibers collected from many sources and delivered to the laboratory. The report on examination of microscopic measurement and spectrographic analysis of several dozen fibers sent from IHI LLC in Lakewood, California was summarized as: the fibers identified, gel material, and gel-shaped materials had no cellular integrity with no eukaryotic cells. The materials identified in the fibers were of a manufactured nanotechnology to form a specific structure with an undetermined function. The chemical composition of the fibers that had EDS and Raman did not match the chemical composition of the human body, nor were they any part of the human body: nails, hair, skin, nerves, etc. Special features as identified by Los Angeles County Fire Department personnel are the following. 1. Skin melts or burns at above 165 degrees. Fibers from a human body that do not melt at 1400 degrees Fahrenheit or above 165 degrees are not made of human cells. 3. Human tissue does not secrete gels, nor would they be of known human cellular composition that melt above 300 degrees centigrade, approximately over 600 degrees Fahrenheit. The human body is incapable of producing indestructible fibers without some kind of outside involvement. There is evidence of bioengineered plant species in Morgellons fiber samples. Dr. Mei Huan Ho and Professor Joe Cummins found genetically engineered agrobacterium samples, which are a vector system for genetic transfer. According to Dr. Ho, who has put up 4 videos on the subject on YouTube, preliminary findings suggest a link between Morgellons disease and agrobacterium, a soil bacterium extensively manipulated and used in making GM crops, unquote. On April 6, 2010, in Natural Nanotechnology, an international study based at the University of Pennsylvania announced in an article titled, "Pitt-led international study identifies human enzyme that breaks down potentially toxic nanomaterials, opens door to novel drug delivery," that a team of more than 20 researchers directed white blood cells containing the oxidizing human enzyme myeloperoxidase to attack carbon nanotubes, reducing their unhealthful effects and prompting natural biodegradation. These super strong carbon nanotubes are found in products ranging from electronics to plastics and are notoriously durable. In my opinion, this sounds very promising, but it is extremely expensive, upwards of $1,000 for a small amount, and not commercially available at this time. Myeloperoxidase is a peroxide enzyme in humans encoded by the MPO gene on chromosome 17 and is derived from a subtype of white blood cells called neutrophils, a type of white blood cells that are the first to show up at the site of an infection. There is ample evidence to suggest that this enzyme is derived from human placenta and fetal cells, as this is where it is found to be the most plentiful. I suspect this could involve aborted fetuses in the manufacture of the enzyme, but I can't prove it. Quoting again from the article, carbon nanotubes are 1-atom thick rolls of graphite, 100,000 times smaller than a human hair, yet stronger than steel. They are used to reinforce plastics, ceramics, or concrete, are excellent conductors of electricity and heat, and are sensitive chemical sensors. However, a nanotube surface also contains thousands of atoms that could react with the human body in unknown ways. Tests on mice have shown that nanotube inhalation results in severe lung inflammation coupled with an early onset of fibrosis. Some well-known victims of Morgellons disease are Joni Mitchell, former Oakland A's pitcher Billy Koch and his family, and Cindy Casey Holman, executive director of the Charles E. Holman Foundation. I have seen and read stories of doctors and nurses who have come down with Morgellons, some of whom were blackballed from medicine when they made an effort to find treatments for their patients. Dr. Greg Smith posted a letter to his colleagues about Morgellons disease on the Charles E. Holman CEHF website, and in it has revealed that he also has the disease. Quoting from his letter, tragically, it seems the systemic symptoms are not being considered in these patients. This appears to be a multi-system disorder, as a large proportion of patients report neurological, psychiatric, and gastrointestinal symptoms. Almost all experience significant and disabling fatigue, problems with concentration and short-term memory, as well as other cognitive difficulties. Many experience periods of what is called brain fog. Some have been diagnosed with ADHD, bipolar disorder, or other psychiatric diagnoses. A significant number have neurological impairments, including multiple sclerosis, ALS, and other neuropathies. Among children with this disease, about half have the diagnosis of ADHD. 10% carry the diagnosis of autism. The personal medical history of most patients is bizarre. The symptoms they describe, as well as their observations, seem totally beyond belief. When they occur on one's own body, it can cause one to question his sanity. I know. I have had this disease since May 2004. I have seen things happening to my own body which have stretched the limits of belief. I also developed neurologic symptoms early this year which became severe enough. I have been unable to work since May 2005. Unquote. An article by Hank P. Albarelli Jr. and Zoe Martel dated June 24, 2010, with minor corrections, details how many other doctors at his hospital met with Dr. Edward Spencer, a neurologist, and insisted he get a psychiatric evaluation and forced him to shut down his practice because of his pursuit of information on Morgellons disease and the conclusions he came to due to his own research. Dr. Edward Spencer, 75 years old at the time of the writing, is one of the few physicians in the United States that takes Morgellons disease very seriously. Spencer is a Stanford University and Yale University Medical School educated neurologist who worked for nearly 40 years at Petaluma Valley Hospital in Northern California. One day, several years ago, Dr. Spencer was summoned to meet with the hospital's Physicians Wellness Committee. Spencer had no idea what the purpose of the meeting was, but thought perhaps they wanted to discuss his recently expressed concerns about swine flu and vaccines in Eastern Europe. Dr. Spencer had been alarmed to learn that the flu vaccine sent to Eastern Europe was reportedly contaminated with lethal bird flu virus. Additionally, he had been an outspoken advocate for Morgellons patients. Spencer had earlier stated, "The CDC and medical establishment have been totally negligent in studying the system of disorders known as Morgellons and have provided no treatment, support, or comfort at all to patients afflicted." He further stated, "Morgellons is not a problem of delusions of parasitosis. It is an unexplained illness which is characterized by skin manifestations including non-healing lesions, itching, and the appearance of fibers. There appears to be a strong association with Lyme disease." Once in the meeting, Spencer recalls, "I naively thought that maybe they actually wanted to discuss some of my findings about swine flu. But he was instead shocked to hear that the committee was greatly concerned about his positions on swine flu and Morgellons, and that they wanted him to agree to undergo psychiatric evaluation because they felt he might be a possible danger to his patients." Spencer, who had been associated with the hospital for nearly 40 years, said, quote, "I could not believe what I was hearing. I was in a state of near shock, sitting there with all my files on swine flu thinking they were actually interested in my findings." Unquote. Following a second meeting with the committee, Dr. Spencer said he realized, quote, "I was up against a star chamber and kangaroo court which had already decided to get rid of me." He explains, "I had never challenged the system before, but I had come to the point where I felt I had to do it. Too much was going on that really bothered me. I had come to realize that the pharmaceutical companies were basically a conspiracy against common people, that truth about a lot of things had become submerged big time, that medicine today was 100 years behind the times and had been taken over by military medicine. There seemed to be a massive malignant agenda at play." Unquote. After resigning his position at the hospital, Spencer testified about Morgellons disease before the mayor and city council of Berkeley, California. He stated in part, quote, "There now exists strong data indicating that this disorder, Morgellons, is associated with nanotechnology, specifically nanomachines in the form of nanofibers," unquote. About 30 days later, Dr. Spencer recounted that he had made plans to attend an infectious disease conference in Malaysia, but before he left, he was involved in a strange automobile accident. His car was struck head-on by another vehicle traveling completely on his side of the road. Hospitalized with non-life-threatening injuries, Spencer oddly entered a disassociated state for about 4 hours. He states that no reason or diagnosis for this was ever established. He recalls, quote, "I was on my cell phone when it started, and phone records revealed that I called a woman in Iowa who tracks Morgellons patients and was connected for 7 minutes. I have no memory of this," unquote. In an interview with these authors, Dr. Spencer said, quote, "I regard Morgellons disorder as a hybrid bio-nanomachine terror weapon. Establishment medicine and the government, which is now a fraudulent foreign-owned corporation, go to great lengths to protect Morgellons from investigation of any sort. Morgellons is not one thing, but is actually a system of multiple attack vectors that damage the body in numerous ways and carry various DNA and RNA strands. It is made in laboratories by talented men and women who have lost their souls and adhere to satanic principles," unquote. Some of the institutions currently studying this disease are the Carnicom Institute, Randy Weimar at Oklahoma State University Center for Health Sciences, Lyme Disease Research Group, Department of Biology and Environmental Sciences, University of New Haven, Morgellonsresearch.org, closed down but website is still available, Candy Griffin Vandewalker's Morgellons Research Group, which is more in line with my own research, and the Charles E. Holman Foundation, CEHF, which focuses mainly on Lyme disease as a cause and concentrates their efforts on raising funding for other researchers, including those working at the University of New Haven. In their research, CEHF has found that some of the fibers are made up of collagen and keratin. This is true, since the fibers tend to scavenge our collagen and keratin to continue their self-replication cycle. It is the nanotubes that are seemingly indestructible. Dr. Hildegard Staninger has done an extensive body of work on it. I know of at least one non-credentialed microbiologist currently working on it, Steve Bedingfield. He seems to be convinced that most of the world's ills, including Morgellons disease, come from cyanobacteria that is proliferating on the earth, and that it most likely came from a meteorite or several meteorites and crashed into the ocean, is now coming up out of deep sea vents. In my opinion, these are all working on different parts of the puzzle of Morgellons disease, but it is a very tough puzzle to get a handle on. There are quite a few individuals who have also come up with information through their own investigations, such as Skizit Gesture on YouTube, who is also a victim, but has come up with a great deal of scientific data related to the disease. Her videos are well worth watching. Marsha Pavlis, another victim, has done a lot of investigation and is the person who made contact with Belle Van Eden, the lab scientist who posted the video titled Morgellons, a Silent Superbug and Fiber Disease, along with the genetic sequencing of the disease described in the video. One of the best videos I've found is Morgellons Actually Explained by Sophia Smallstorm. Also Carolyn Carter, and the list goes on. Even the Mayo Clinic has begun research on Morgellons. All have different ideas on the cause, many have similar views, but none have come up with an absolute cure. I am not 100% cured either, although I feel that I am very close to getting there. I have put together my own protocol based on rebuilding the immune system that I use faithfully every day. I will get more into that later. It is my firm belief that the powers that be are doing everything they can to change our DNA, to make us unfit vessels for the Spirit of God, enacting Agenda 21's population control, and attempting to fulfill the precepts set up on the Georgia Guidestones to maintain humanity under 500 million worldwide. It is possible that many scientists who are working in compartmentalized research programs are unaware of the ultimate goal, which is working to unlock the so-called junk DNA in our bodies that God locked up after the fallen angel's genetic manipulation of our DNA. Researchers have been finding triple helix and even quadruple helix strands in humans during their research. There is a story titled Box of Chocolates by Doug Hagman that recounts a triple helix DNA in some of the elite and how it was revealed. Quadruple helix appears to be associated with DNA changes and may even indicate cancer. Excerpted from the article titled Quadruple Helix DNA Seen in Human Cells by Jonathan Amos, a science correspondent with the BBC News, dated January 20th, 2013, it says, quote, Cambridge University scientists say they have seen four-stranded DNA at work in human cells for the first time. The famous, quote, molecule of life, unquote, which carries our genetic code, is more familiar to us as a double helix. But researchers tell the journal Nature Chemistry that the quadruple helix is also present in our cells and in ways that might possibly relate to cancer. They suggest that control of the structures could provide novel ways to fight the disease. The existence of these, quote, the existence of these structures may be loaded when the cell has a certain genotype or a certain dysfunctional state, said Professor Shankar Balasubramanian from Cambridge's Department of Chemistry. We need to prove that, but if that is the case, targeting them with synthetic molecules could be an interesting way of selectively targeting those cells that have this dysfunction, quote, unquote, he told BBC News. The fibers are in the air, the water, the animals, the trees, and our food supply. It is on all surfaces, exposed to the spraying, comes in through our windows, gets into our cars. It is everywhere. Chemwebs have been spotted falling from the sky and spread out over large areas of land on many occasions. I and many other sufferers have found these chemwebs growing in our homes. There are many videos on YouTube posted on that topic alone. A good one to check out is one titled, Pilots, Doctors, and Scientists Tell the Truth About Chemtrails. There is evidence to show that some of the Morgellons fibers are made up of carbon and/or polymer nanotubes which appear to grow due to some type of pi stacking, such as in a van der Waals force, stacking hydrogen bonding, or aromatic ring bonding. DNA bases contain aromatic rings, which are chains of atoms with electrons moving around them that create a stable bond. It has been reported that they self-assemble, giving the appearance of growth. The more we breathe them in, absorb through foods and through our skin, the more material they have to reform and proliferate. Some of them appear to be made up of synthetic DNA. They are synthetic genetic polymers capable of heredity and evolution, or at least that is what scientists are working to achieve, and they have gone a long way toward that goal. How can synthetic DNA get introduced into our bodies? Carbon nanotubes wrapped with a single strand of DNA can fool our immune system. Scientists from the J. Craig Venter Institute announced a few years ago the creation of a synthetic bacterial cell genome now known as Cynthia, with an S. From their website, quote, now, this scientific team headed by Drs. Craig Venter, Hamilton Smith, and Clyde Hutchison have achieved the final step in their quest to create the first synthetic bacterial cell. In a publication in Science magazine, Daniel Gibson, PhD, and a team of 23 additional researchers outlined the steps to synthesize a 1.08 million base pair Mycoplasma mycoides genome constructed from 4 bottles of chemicals that make up DNA. This synthetic genome has been booted up in a cell to create the first cell controlled completely by a synthetic genome," unquote. Thus they have released the genie from the bottle. But I believe it may have been done long before they made the announcement. If not by these particular scientists, then others before them. Adding to this crazy mix is an article in Science Magazine in April 20th, 2012 titled, "New Genetic Letters Augment DNA and Soon Perhaps Life." Written by Robert F. Service, it says, quote, "At the ACS meeting, a pair of research groups reported that they now have synthetic nucleotides that can be incorporated into DNA and can be copied with near perfection by enzymes that copy natural DNA. These additions to the genetic alphabet are already enabling researchers to write new chemical functions into DNA, which could help usher in a wide array of biotechnology advances, and they are a critical step along the way to making semi-synthetic life forms, written in the first new type of genetic code that life has ever known," unquote. Some of these nanotubes are filled with a cocktail mix of genetically altered bacteria, cyanobacteria, viruses, insect vectors, fungi, and possibly spirochetes. A large portion of victims, 80 to 90%, have also been diagnosed as having Lyme disease, along with the Morgellons, although I am one of the victims who does not have Lyme disease, and metallic salts. Instead of medicine, these nanotubes may be color-coded for the pathogens carried in them. They may also contain eggs from mites, nematodes, which feed on fungi and bacteria, and other microscopic insects such as demodex. Some of the black fibers may actually be long, nano-sized filaments such as sporangia or spirochetes, which do grow and move on their own. It appears that DNA experimentation has gone haywire in the heads of scientists who seem to care more for their work than for the people affected by it. I have nearly 8,000 photographs, which I took mostly with a handheld microscope, of many different types of fibers that came out of my own body, and some of them are quite bizarre looking. It is interesting to note that many of them have rounded bodies that are solid and quite colorful, and others are flattened out, pale, and translucent. It appears that once they release whatever they are carrying as a payload, they are designed to break down in the body, but not all of them do so. Some continue to self-replicate because they are not natural to the body, and the body's defenses, being compromised, are unable to break them down. Color-coded nanotubes are currently being used in medicine to target cancer cells with medicines. They are self-assembling with electromagnetic properties and contain built-in nanosensors. This explains how they can be drawn together to the surface of the skin following electromagnetic currents, and why they are also drawn out of the body to electronic equipment like television and computer screens. These fibers appear to be activated by electromagnetic transmissions from all kinds of antenna arrays, satellite dishes, Gwen towers, HARP, and even smart meters. They move through the body's natural bioelectrical fields, the blood and the lymph system, and attach to nerve endings along the way, causing excruciating pain and tiny shocks to the nervous system. They, or their payloads, destroy or compromise the immune system and impede the ability of the thyroid and lymph systems to do the jobs they were designed to do, not only in human bodies but also in the animal kingdom. I have spoken to one person who had surgery on his thyroid, and he said it was filled with a mass of Morgellons fibers. You can find out just how many towers and antennas are in your neighborhood by going to antennasearch.com. The last time I checked, there were 86 towers and 731 antennas in my neighborhood. According to this site, there are more than 1.8 million towers and antennas in America in their database. If your immune system is weak or compromised, as mine has been, it is impossible for your body to generate the white blood cells needed to fight off the pathogens. There is also evidence that the white blood cells that usually fight off these pathogens in their natural state do not recognize that the pathogens are there in order to fight them off. Pathogens build biofilm matrices under the skin to hide in. I have recently seen laboratory slides prepared by the pathology department at Concord Hospital in New Hampshire after a knee replacement performed on Jan Smith, which she posted, that show what the pathology report says are fat cells with rivers of silicone. Jan said that she had no idea how she got silicone in her body when she had no silicone implants of any kind. It is interesting to note that the slides show hexagon-shaped images similar to microscopic images I took of a biofilm matrix that came out of my own body and which have pathogenic fibers hiding deep within. According to Clifford Carnicom of the Carnicom Institute, it appears that a very large segment of the population that has been tested actually have the Morgellons fibers in their system, around 80%, but they are not all presenting with disease symptoms, at least not yet. He recommends a simple way to identify initially if a person has Morgellons fibers in their system, known as the red wine test. It works equally well with red or purple natural unsedimented grape juice. It appears that Morgellons fibers are attracted to iron contained in the blood or in the wine or grape juice. It seems to be a fairly good indicator, in my opinion. I took the test in October 2013 using clear and non-sedimentary purple grape juice when I finally acknowledged to myself that I might be experiencing symptoms of Morgellons disease. I brushed my teeth and rinsed out my mouth well with distilled water. I took a mouthful of the juice and swished it around in my mouth for a couple of minutes, then spit it into a white saucer plate. To my horror, there were so many clumps of fibers in the liquid that I was shocked to see them. It helped confirm to me that my suspicions were correct. This is just one test that you can do at home. There are people who will claim that it is not a reliable test, but I think it is a starting point coupled with the stinging and biting sensations. There are other ways to tell if you have Morgellons. When you get to a more advanced state, when lesions develop that never seem to heal, you see different colored fibers sticking out of them or showing underneath the skin with a microscope or even a jeweler's loupe. In some people, the fibers are predominantly white and black, but depending on the amount and type of contamination, they can be red, blue, purple, green, and colors in between. The following Sunday, I tried another experiment. I filled a mason jar halfway with distilled water, spit into it, added a couple of drops of red grape juice as a growth medium, then screwed on the cap with a couple of holes punched into it for air. To my surprise, by Tuesday, there was a tangle of fibers growing in the water, joined together in a clump about an inch long and easily visible to the naked eye. It almost resembled a cross between a pinkish beige caterpillar and seaweed, but with longer, looser, thicker hairs and no solid body. Some of the symptoms that I have been experiencing over the years include electrostatic shocks in the middle of the summer, static in the hair, which turned out to be actually a type of microorganism that invades the actual hair shaft, eating away the keratin so that the hair becomes smooth, no cuticles, and crystal clear like fiber optics. These odd new hairs as they grow tend to stand straight up and sway back and forth like antennas when hit with EMF waves. When they touch the skin, the organisms come out of the hair and cause further breakouts wherever it touches, reinfecting through the skin. Other symptoms include unusually low body temperature, around 96 degrees, frequent nosebleeds, brittle teeth that break easily and rot in the mouth, watches going haywire, new batteries die, black squiggly things under the skin of my feet, ankles, and over the big toes with edema, a toe infection that would not go away for months on end. Toe and fingernails look like they are being eaten away around the edges with fibers embedded in some of them and congregating or colonizing underneath the nails. Strange white or clear motile hairs growing on the face and body that also move and can be pulled out easily with the fingers because they have no root system. Colon pain, eye, ear, and sinus infections, polymerized skin patches, even some that look a bit like alligator or snake skin with some greenish or amber coloration to it, and sores or lesions forming in various parts of my body, crystals forming in blood, black rod-shaped and filamentous bacteria or fungi, multicolored fibers that grow, strongyloid-type cotton nematodes coming out of my skin and hair, along with tiny eggs and green egg sacs, muscle spasms with pain and swelling in my joints, double vision and bleeding into the eye after a corneal transplant, loss of balance, dizziness, memory problems, foggy brain, cellulitis, and breathing problems. Other strange artifacts emerging from my skin include glass-like shards, a purple artifact that appeared to have brain synapse-type markings on it, pure green chlorophyll bits, other plant-like things such as a nano-sized fern. My first notable symptom appeared in 2003 when I was hospitalized for a form of flesh-eating bacteria called cellulitis on my left shin, right over the area where I have a titanium metal rod inside the tibia bone due to having broken it years before. It started with a gigantic hematoma that came out of nowhere. Then as it subsided, the skin started breaking down in the center of the bruise, turning red and very painful. I went to the emergency room and was admitted immediately. While in the hospital, I was put on an antibiotic drip, which gave me hives that started slowly in the hospital and increased the next day after I was released. I nearly went into anaphylactic shock. My doctor tried prescribing several different antibiotics, but they all gave me hives, which hit me very quickly from that point on. This is when I found out that my immune system had collapsed and I had become allergic to antibiotics. When my doctor told me he didn't know what else to do for me, I did some research and found that some doctors were having good results treating cellulitis with colloidal silver. I bought some colloidal silver cream and it worked, but for several months after that I kept getting mysterious bruises on my legs, and then the cellulitis would appear wherever there was a bruise. In 2004, I suffered several episodes of smoke inhalation thanks to a careless next-door neighbor smoking up their apartment, which sent me to the emergency room twice in an ambulance from my cardiopulmonary doctor's office. He put me on 3 different inhalers, Spiriva, Advair, and an albuterol rescue inhaler. And I had to use a nebulizer with albuterol while I was bedridden for about 3 months. I nearly died from this. Eventually, I stopped using the Spiriva, but continued with the Advair and albuterol for several years. After doing some research, I started using colloidal silver in the nebulizer and was able to get off all of the inhalers. My lungs still can't handle smoke or fumes due to the damage done, but otherwise my lungs are in pretty good condition, except that for some reason I find that I forget to breathe sometimes. There are times when my husband shakes me awake and tells me that I had stopped breathing, and it scares him. If you see frequent chemtrail spraying in the skies above your home and have doubts about the existence of Morgellons fibers, just check out the dust in your home. Have you noticed that it seems to be building up faster and that you have to dust more often to keep it under control? Take a good look at it, preferably with a magnifying glass or even a jeweler's loupe. Do you see a lot of white fibers in it, all the same length and thickness? You may very well notice some brightly colored fibers in there as well. Dust is usually gray or brown, not white. Is it sticking more on the sides of things like appliances, walls, etc.? If you are in the path of chemtrails, you will very likely find this new kind of dust in your house, and that it tends to gravitate toward your television screen, computer screen, and other electronic devices. Are you cleaning your glasses every hour or so? Are you having trouble wearing your contact lenses? I had to quit wearing contact lenses, and I had to clean my glasses several times a day. Morgellons fibers will get into your eyes, and so will the biofilm. For a short time I had flashing lights in my eyes and saw geometric designs that interfered with my vision. It was, in my opinion, the biofilm refracting light, and being so close to the retina, I could see the matrix formation of the biofilm like it was under a microscope. I started spraying my eyes with colloidal silver in the mornings, and it cleared up. The fibers will congregate on your reading glasses when you are in front of the computer, seemingly attracted to the stronger electromagnetic field. If they get into your computer drive, they can crash your drive. I've had several computer crashes over the past few years because of that. Biofilm is produced prodigiously in the bodies of Morgellons sufferers and exudes through the skin. It becomes a daily process of removal and is extremely difficult to get rid of. It forms a matrix under the skin and is where bacteria and other pathogens hide from the macrophages of the immune system. Blood spots form underneath the surface of the skin before fibers break through to the surface. Morgellons fibers congregate in joints, weak spots in the body from prior injuries, and especially grow in warm, moist, folded areas of the skin, like under the breasts or any other overlapping areas. It can affect mechanisms of breathing in the lungs and other organs. It shuts down the immune system and can penetrate the brain-blood barrier, causing brain fog and making it difficult for most sufferers to maintain a job. It can cause family breakups and isolation from loved ones for fear of infecting them, even when those same loved ones refuse to believe the disease exists. According to scientific reports, there are 3 types of materials found in Morgellons disease that are also being found in water and soil samples taken where chemtrails are apparent. Metallic salts such as barium, strontium, titanium, and aluminum oxide, filaments or fibers, and engineered biologicals. These things charge the air and destroy its neutrality. A neutral atmosphere is supportive of life. These additives to our atmosphere are not neutral to life. The fibers can be seen in the night sky using a black light after trail spraying. They are life-threatening and can lead to severe bronchial congestion, sinus infections, and Morgellons disease. Aluminum in the mix can also attribute to the cause of Alzheimer's disease. The heavy metals being sprayed on us seem to have the effect of turning the body into a giant receiver. Many sufferers are also reporting hearing hums and other sounds and feeling vibrations. I am one of those. In fact, it was these hums and vibrations that caused me to start researching and eventually led me to the study of Morgellons disease. Lung disease and breathing problems are 2 of many symptoms experienced by Morgellons sufferers. Lung disease has become the 3rd highest killer in the entire world, moving up from the 8th position in less than a decade. Lower respiratory infections, fungi, bacteria, and viruses are in the number 1 position for most infectious. Is 3rd at 3.2 million, 10.6%. COPD, bronchitis, or emphysema is 4th at 3 million, or 6.7%, and tracheobronchitis, lung cancers at 1.5 million, or 2.7% of the top 10 causes of death worldwide, according to the World Health Organization, WHO. Combined, they are a whopping 20% and higher than the second on the list, which is stroke at 6.2 million, or 11.2% in 2011. God knows how much higher it is now with all of the continued geoengineering, chemtrail spraying going on worldwide. There are now reports of chemtrail flu and thunderstorm asthma being reported in various places around the world. Our air and environment has become a toxic soup. Any doubts that I may have harbored about whether or not I had Morgellons disappeared when I developed a huge swelling over my thyroid with large breakouts, sores, and infections on my face, neck, chest, and underneath my breasts. I have photographs to prove it. I had been using both a magnetic pulsar and a zapper alternatively. They cause a proliferation of fibers all along my lymph system. Fibers came out of my wrist, attracted by the zapper electrodes. I managed to capture a photograph of them coming out of my wrist after removing an electrode. There were fibers all over the electrode. The area around my lymph system grew a second skin that looked and felt like a polymer. It took 7 skin peels with 15% glycolic acid to remove it. It was very painful, but I got it all off. There were sores underneath it, and nothing I could do would reach them until I removed the surface skin. This is how I discovered that Morgellons fibers, which permeate the body, can be enticed to the surface of the skin with electronic zappers and pulsars, but they can also worsen the symptoms. As the fibers, which are attracted to electronic pulses and machinery, tend to travel through the bioelectric streams of the body and attach to the nerve endings near the surface of the skin. They then send tiny shocks that feel like sharp bites when they are activated by low-frequency electromagnetic waves, becoming more painful when they emerge through the skin. The fibers tend to move more at night, which I have noticed also happens to be when the EMF pulses from HAARP are at their highest gravity activity. At least that is when I hear and feel them at their highest strength. In my case, the fact that my apartment building is built on top of a hill made up of crystalline granite may help to magnify the effect of the electromagnetic waves on the fiber's activity. Morgellons feeds on bioelectric and electromagnetic frequency energy fields. The fibers tend to increase in number and get more active when you are in those fields. The EMF waves influence your mental state with surreptitious transmissions, and the barium, strontium, and aluminum in the chemtrails facilitate that as well. Far infrared heat that is recommended by Dr. Hildegard Staninger appears to have some effect on the microorganisms, but does not kill the nanotechnology and artificial DNA. There is another person who claims that his research proves that pulse magnetism kills all parasites, microorganisms, and nanotechnology throughout the body. I paid for one of his devices but never received it. After many excuses and a year later, I requested and received a refund. Based on his claims, I have tried magnets and magnetic pads, a Hue pulsar, Bob Beck protocol, and a Hulda-Clark type zapper. Within a couple of months, I found myself fighting to remove the polymer plastic type growth that covered my neck and chest all the way down to my waist and grease sores underneath, and I am not the only one to experience this. Some Morgellons sufferers have taken to calling this alligator skin. It was extremely painful, and I had to use glycolic acid several times on my skin to allow me to peel off the growing layers, exposing raw flesh where it peeled off, which left sores with fibers in them and scars. I would advise against using either of those protocols for the Morgellons fibers. While they might help with the pathogens, they have no effect on the artificial fibers. In my experience, any electronically based protocols cause exponential growth. It is my belief that our DNA resonates with the heartbeat of God when we are receiving His Spirit. Lucifer is working to obstruct that resonation or frequency and uses, through influencing human beings, chemicals like fluoride to calcify our pineal gland, demonically inspired music, and other distractions to shut off or impede our ability to hear God when He calls to us, effectively cutting off that resonation. The pineal gland has long been considered the seat of our souls, connecting our soul, mind, body, and spirit, and it is under attack. EMF waves affect the pineal gland and regulation of the sleep cycles and circadian rhythm of the body by blocking the production of melatonin. Along with calcification of the pineal gland by fluoride, this is extremely detrimental to the body's overall well-being. The body needs sleep to regenerate and heal. I have read that the brain interprets electromagnetic waves as if they were light. The melatonin secreted by the pineal gland is only produced in the dark, and melatonin is necessary to signal the body to repair itself in the dark. Low-frequency electromagnetic waves may cause the pineal gland to shrivel due to being bombarded with them on a daily basis. EMF waves are emitted by appliances, wireless, satellite dishes, HAARP, high-frequency active auroral research program, officially an investigation project to understand, simulate, and control ionospheric processes, including the weather, along with the use of fluoride. And the effects of barium and aluminum on the pineal gland may also have a connection to Alzheimer's and senility. In fact, the widely used pine cone symbol represents and looks like a pineal gland. The pineal gland has been immortalized in ancient times as a pine cone-shaped gland and can be seen in ancient Egyptian paintings, in tombs, and in carvings throughout the ancient world. It has even been given a place of honor at the Vatican as a gigantic statue in the Fontana della Pigna, or the Court of the Pine Cone. The sounds I hear are definitely not tinnitus or ringing of the ears. I have had tinnitus in my left ear since 1964 when a cherry bomb exploded inside of a high school locker I was leaning against. The hum is totally different. It even blocks out the tinnitus at times. Most of the time I can hear both of them at the same time. Sometimes I have difficulty hearing my husband speak to me because it is so loud. Also, tinnitus is a constant sound. While I have noticed that I hear the hum more often when I am indoors, near a satellite or wireless connection, and can go out for a walk in the country and hear nothing unless I walk near a Glen tower, wireless telephone, or broadband. Then the sound gets louder the closer I get to the tower. The same thing happens when I walk into a store with wireless service or spend the night in a hotel with wireless. I have my own ideas on what the hum actually is. The earth has a natural low-frequency hum that is usually undetectable to the human ear. It is laid out in natural energy grids or ley lines that are accessed by birds, animals, whales, etc. for migration purposes. Man has found a way to tap into that energy and manipulate it via the High-Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, frequently referred to as HAARP, and other means. As in everything on this planet, anything conceived in the minds of men can be used for good or evil, as evidenced by the previous 2 world wars and all other wars throughout the history of this planet. Through this manipulation, man has begun to interfere with the Earth's energy field and the atmosphere that envelops it. They have also found ways to use these low-frequency electromagnetic waves to intercept brain waves and influence them. Case in point is the new Cognitive Technology Threat Warning System, CT2WS, launched in 2008 by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, which uses a brain-computer interface to analyze threats. According to the proceedings of the National Academy of Science in March 2010, quote, electromagnetic currents directed at the right temporoparietal junction, TPJ, located above and behind the right ear, can impair a person's ability to make moral judgments by disruption of this region of the brain. This is also the same ear in which I hear the electromagnetic waves, and also where many other people around the world are reporting to hear it as well. According to the Bible, this is the same spot where priests were anointed to hear the voice of God. Quote, and of the rest of the oil that is in his hand shall the priest put upon the tip of the right ear of him that is to be cleansed. Leviticus 14:17, King James Version. It was reported in 1991 in a news brief by ITV News Bureau Limited in East Duran, Saudi Arabia, that the Pentagon used a silent sound spread spectrum SSSS weapon during the Gulf War, which caused the surrender of thousands of Iraqi soldiers who began to hear voices in their heads telling them to surrender. They thought it was the voice of their God. If they can do this to enemy combatants, what is to stop those who would misuse this technology from using it on American citizens and anyone else they would want to influence to do their will? According to an issue of Wired magazine, in an article titled A Voice Only You Can Hear by Sharon Weinberger on June 5, 2007, writing about DARPA's sonic projector long-range acoustic device, LRAD, microwaves at certain frequencies can bring an auditory effect that sounds like it is coming from inside a person's head, like a voice from God. The inventor who created Voice of God VOG technology, Dr. Robert Duncan, Harvard, MIT, and CIA, admitted on Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory program that this technology is actually being used on American citizens. It is also interesting to note that the first unclassified successful transmission of the human voice directly into the skull of a living person was performed by Dr. Joseph C. Sharp of the Walter Reed Army Institute of Research in 1974. By converting a hypnotist's voice into the ultrasound range using a modified telephone voice changer, it is possible to hypnotize a target without a target being aware from a hidden location and leave zero trace evidence. You may also want to check out Audio Spotlight technology, which was developed by Holosonic Research Lab, which uses a sound beam system that was used in a billboard ad by Paranormal State a few years ago. It was up for about a week, and if you stood in just the right spot in front of the billboard, you could hear the ad, but not the person who stood right next to you. They are using it in other commercial settings now, such as bookstores and libraries, and installed systems at the Seattle Space Needle, in museums, and at Disney Epcot Center as far back as 2007. According to CNET, at the time, quote, the folks who heard the ad for A&E's TV show Paranormal State, emitted from a billboard in New York City's Greenwich Village, must have thought it was pretty weird. As they walked into the targeted area, they were exposed to highly focused sound, picked up not by their ears, but by their skulls. The otherwise inaudible sound waves are experienced via bone conduction. The sound resonates inside the passerby's head. This technology has a very similar effect to what is being used to torment certain people of our population who are feeling as though they have been targeted, and may actually simulate the way demonic or even angelic beings, good or evil, are able to communicate psychically right into the human brain through or using the pineal gland as a receptor. We are all being targeted in some way, but only a small percentage of us are even aware of it or feel and hear the effects. While researching why so many advanced Morgellons victims, including myself, had very strange changes taking place in their hair, eventually turning golden and then clear like fiber optics, moving around seemingly in response to EMF waves, I ran into this odd article titled Human Hair Fibers Transmit High-Quality Images, dated March 5, 2014, and written by Laura L. Hunt at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. In the article, she made the statement, quote, after having recently discovered a new way to propagate multiple beams of light through a single strand of optical fiber, engineers at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, UWM, now have found that their novel human hair fiber architecture can transmit images with a quality that is comparable or better than the current commercial endoscopy imaging fibers. Because of this, the work has potential not only in next-generation high-speed communication, but also biomedical imaging, unquote. That article made me wonder if EMF waves are transmitting messages and images directly into the brains of the people with the clear moving hairs. It is such a crazy idea, but nothing surprises me about Morgellons anymore. If it looks and acts like fiber optics, you really have to wonder. The hairs are so disturbing that many of these people have completely shaved off their hair to try and get some relief. According to some reports, at least 3 suicides, and there could be more by now, have been blamed on the hum in the United Kingdom. People have been complaining in various places that they hear voices inside of their heads telling them to commit suicide or to harm other people. Are these all psychoses as defined by the psychiatric community, or are there more nefarious things going on to create the illusion of psychoses? Because evidence points to weaponized mycoplasma as being a huge contributor to the root cause of Morgellons, I felt it was important to quote a few paragraphs from an article titled Weaponized Mycoplasma by Gary Tunsky, dated April 3, 2015, where he says, quote, thanks to the research of Professor Don Scott and Dr. Garth Nicholson, there is a growing awareness of a mysterious and debilitating illness that is affecting over 800,000 Americans and being carried dormant by everyone in North America, just waiting to be triggered into molecular terrorism. This man-made hidden stealth pathogen is named mycoplasma and is the common culprit in almost every disease process today, including AIDS and Lyme disease. Quote, chances are if you feel sick and tired and your doctor is unable to make a definite diagnosis because lab tests, blood chemistry profiles, and tissue cultures failed to reveal any disease pathogen, you might very well be infected with mycoplasma. According to Professor Don Scott, this newly formed virulent pathogen is a weaponized crystalline form of non-pathogenic Brucella bacterium, which resides naturally in the oral cavity, gut flora, and superficial body sites, that has been genetically engineered with the retrovirus Visna from sheep or scabies by our own military. Quote, this mutated subviral particle acts by attaching to a gene in either the cell nuclei or mitochondria, and given a suppressed immune system, acidic pH, low oxygen cell environment, coupled with a triggered physical or emotional trauma, the mycoplasma amyloid will initiate a replication process of useless protein fibrils called nucleation. This process triggers programmed cell death, disabling the ATP-producing factories or mitochondria. These subviral bacterium particles have been termed prions by Dr. Prusiner, stealth viruses by John Martin, amyloid by Dr. Gajusek, and Mycoplasma brucellosis by Don Scott and Garth Nicholson. Despite government-manipulated statistics, there has been an undeniable rapid increase of all neurodegenerative and autoimmune diseases coming out of nowhere since the mid-1990s, with absolutely no origin to their genealogy. Mainstream medical doctors are not trained in detection of non-detectable pathogens. Since mycoplasma hides intracellularly and invades multiple organs and systems, it manifests a vast array of symptoms throughout the whole body, making a correct diagnosis virtually impossible. Quote, due to the misdirection of medical science, compartmentalizing the human body into 10 separate specialty fields: dermatology, endocrinology, urology, neurology, psychology, oncology, gastric specialty, general practice, etc. Like an auto mechanic would segregate engine parts, none of the mainstream physicians understand how all 10 body systems work synergistically as a whole, like a flowing river. This has led medical science to perpetrate trash can labels to terms for symptoms of mycoplasma to hide their ignorance. Quote, Syndrome X, Graves' disease, systemic lupus, Sjogren-Larsen syndrome, Huntington's chorea, Guillain-Barré syndrome, myasthenia gravis, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, Rift Valley fever, Hashimoto, Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, post-traumatic stress syndrome, ADDH, even the recent West Nile virus are all virulent mycoplasma invasions in disguise. The names of the mysterious diseases are simply the location of the mycoplasma invasion destruction, not a new disease. Almost every neurodegenerative and autoimmune disease has a pathogenic mycoplasma species responsible for the initiation of the disease process, unquote. He says that there are 7 weaponized mycoplasma variants that were created covertly by the U.S. government as the following. 1. M. fermentans incognita strain. The term fermentans reveals fermentation process, in essence, yeast, molds, fungus, spores, cancer. 2. M. penetrans penetrate the cell membrane and invade host cells. 3. M. pneumoniae attacks upper respiratory epithelial cells, inflaming them and causing upper respiratory infections and chronic pneumonia. 4. M. genitalium invades urethral tissue and cells in the genital area, causing pelvic inflammation and urethritis. 5. M. hominis is found in joint tissues in rheumatoid arthritis. 6. M. pyrum is found in AIDS as a cofactor accelerating AIDS progression. 7. M. salivarium is found in salivary glands and joint tissues in rheumatoid arthritis. Unquote. It is quite a long article and well worth reading if you want to know more of the details. I do want to quote one more part because he says it so well, and you can see that a lot of the symptoms he lists are also symptoms of Morgellons. Quote, mycoplasma steroid-stealing properties also make the energy-producing mitochondria leaky by robbing cholesterol lipids that are necessary in mitochondrial membrane integrity. When mitochondria bleed, they cannot generate ATP energy necessary for cell energy and function, and nerve cells are the most sensitive to energy deprivation. This explains why chronic fatigue and neurological disorders are the main symptoms of the Trinity diseases: chronic fatigue syndrome, CFS, fibromyalgia, FMS, and Gulf War illness, GWI. In my opinion, they are the same disease ideology, with all three characterizing common symptoms traits of chronic fatigue: short-term memory loss, low-grade fevers, tissue and lymph swelling, joint and muscle pain, stomach and digestive disorders, immunosuppression, and severe systemic chronic infections that invade various organs, tissues, and cells, including the brain, nervous system, and heart. Moving on to the white fibers and fiber balls that Morgellons sufferers, including myself, encounter coming out of their skin or clinging to their hair is actually a genetically mutated cotton nematode. These nematodes will lay eggs under the edges of Morgellon lesions so the larvae can feed on the bacteria and fungi populating there. I have even seen one of the larval stage nematodes pop out of my forehead a few years ago while I was looking in the mirror. While researching for more information on that topic, I ran into this very informative article titled, "The Strange Case of Bacterial Mutations with a Symbiotic Link-Up with a Mutated Engineered Parasite." That's the Morgellons fiber disease, by Rolf A. F. Witchy, dated May 20th, 2006. It is not the whole of disease, as he seems to believe, but it is definitely a piece of the puzzle. Quote, "If a nanometer-sized DU, depleted uranium particle, can attach itself to a human blood cell or to a much smaller virus and even bind itself to DNA, it would certainly also be able to attach itself to bacteria and parasites. The mysterious Morgellons fiber disease, known in China as Strongylus monospinangerum, might be an example of a mutation that should have never happened but is now a worldwide tragedy. The disease is quite new and highly mysterious. It is carried into human biology by nematodes that are tiny worm-like parasites originally engineered for pest control. By mysterious circumstance that no one can explain, the nematodes have become a symbiotic host for bacteria that were engineered for the task to create fine fibers. For some strange, unexplained reason, the nematodes that were designed for pest control suddenly developed a liking for human flesh. And more exotic than this is the way by which they come into people's homes. They are found attached to cotton products, in which they are nestled, encased in cocoons built of fibers produced by the engineered bacteria that the nematodes carry. It appears as if random biological proliferation changed both the bacteria and its new host, in a way as if the process of proliferation has suddenly been put into high gear, with highly mysterious phenomena resulting from it. Once in the human system, the bacteria become highly prolific and active in extruding colored fibers that are seen sticking out of wounds and out of the skin, while the nematodes become parasites. We are told in a medical report, bacterial strains have been engineered for the purposes of creating raw materials biologically, especially fibers, which will be used in creating new textile markets. These bacteria have been extensively engineered and tested over the last 10 years by a plethora of companies: DuPont, Honeywell, Nexia, etc., including the U.S. Army, which using both plant and mammal tissue as a medium to verify their ability to produce these materials. Many failures were reported, and the inadequate bacterial strains were discarded. The bacteria which produce fibers can do so inside the skin as well as outside it, as long as there are available proteins for it to use. The fiber balls that are seen so often with the disease are in fact produced by the bacteria, not nematodes or any other invertebrate species, using the proteins from skin, hair, cloth, etc. The bacteria themselves are quite ineffective, being able to invade the skin and are felt as itchy, stinging sensations on the skin when they enter. When they are multiplying and often rapidly producing fibers, they can be felt as tingling or crawling sensations on or under the skin. The point is that industrially produced bacteria made in huge quantities for industrial purposes and engineered parasites that are designed to destroy pests, since the traditional pesticide DDT has been banned, might all be mutating in their characteristic by alpha radiation damage inflicted by the now omnipresent DU, or depleted uranium particles in the environment. But there is another factor to be considered, namely intentionally developed biological warfare that has taken on a new twist in today's radiation-infested environment. In light of what Rolf said about the fibers being produced in China, I remembered that I had a bad experience with some nightgowns that I bought online a couple of years ago that turned out to have been made in China. They were beautiful, but when I put one on, I had an immediate reaction to it. I had come to a point where I was almost completely symptom-free, but I had a complete relapse, starting with intense stinging and redness around my collarbone where the lace was sewn onto the nightgown. I immediately removed it and took a good look at it. The fibers in the lace were actually moving. I double-bagged the nightgowns and threw them down the incinerator in my building. There is a woman on Facebook who claims to have studied at Caltech that she has Morgellons and has tested it there. She posted in the following information, and in another post she mentioned that she believes the myeloperoxidase to be the cure for Morgellons. Her words are a bit colorful, so I have inserted blanks for the offensive words, but you still get the meaning. Quote, chemtrails contain all types of nanoparticles, but basically they contain synthetic DNA nanotubes, nanotech, which are encapsulated in different types of stealth liposomes. Google those. These are synthetic lipids. Lipids are found naturally in our body, otherwise known as fat, fatty acids, etc. So, the DNA nanotubes, which have a metallic base, are encapsulated in liposomes, which are nano-sized and can be in the gas, liquid, or solid form. The liposome protects the nanotube and allows it to be accepted by the body and not rejected by the immune system. So this makes it an organic substance. Once it hits the body, the liposome breaks down and merges with the real lipids in your body, and the DNA nanotube is released and begins to replicate and merge with your DNA. It grows webs and networks inside of the body, and now you have a non-organic substance which is metallic base growing and replicating. The nanotubes are ferroelectric, which means that they feed off internal and external frequencies, and our heartbeat generates enough frequency to keep this blank happy. But as you know, they have bombarded us with so much external blank that there is no escaping it. It's so blank up, kind of too out there to really explain to people. Even the most well-intentioned doctor, scientist who knows about lipids, DNA, etc. cannot detect this blank once it is inside of the body, because it is made of synthetic substances that naturally occur in the body. You can't test for lipids because they are supposed to be there. They have come up with all of this under the guise of medical drug delivery, and that is how they hide it. Billions of dollars in research under this premise, but it's a load of crap. This is what we are being sprayed with, and all of the medical students who did all this research don't even know they helped in this genocide. They really think that they were performing medical research and helping people. It's all in the DARPA line item budgets. So the only way to study this blank is to get it before it enters the body. That is the key, and that is why nobody can find an answer for all the people who are suffering from Morgellons. Once it's in the body, it's undetectable. So that is why I used air samples, which is full of this crap, and studied those at Caltech. In the nanotechnology department, I didn't know blank about nanotech other than biomedical sciences, but I found people who did. Our air is saturated with this stuff, and it doesn't occur naturally in the environment. More saturated when they are dumping chemtrails on top of us, so there is no doubt what is causing this, no doubt at all. We both agree, unquote on her, we both agree from our research that Morgellons appears to be made up of at least, in part, synthetic DNA, and is powered by the bioelectric energy that runs through our own bodies, and that it is very reactive to electromagnetic fields. There are quite a few sufferers out there that went out and bought microscopes, as I did, to document the fibers and all types of strange artifacts. One of the most prolific was Jan Smith, who has passed away, according to some sources. Her website, morgellonsexposed.com, has been removed, and most of her work has been lost to posterity. There are some websites that still carry some of her work and photographs, such as Rents.com, who has documented quite a bit on Morgellons, and I have saved some of her photos as well. There are other valuable websites that have shown extensive research, including lab tests and photographs, such as Morgellons Disease Awareness.com, MorgellonsResearchGroup.com, MorgellonsWatch.com, and ArizonaSkywatch.com, which have many of Jean's photos of quantum dots and hexagonal crystalline structures that came out of her own and other people's bodies. Some of these sites are either up and down intermittently, or the powers that be are making it difficult to get to them. General consensus is that Morgellons is not a natural disease and most likely came from a lab or several labs working in isolation from each other. Some of the fibers and materials coming from the bodies of Morgellons sufferers actually have identifying markers on them seen only through a high-powered microscope. These have been detailed by both Skizit Gesture and Jan Smith, among others. Jan Smith has a video on YouTube that shows a blinking particulate that actually changes colors of light, definitely not normal in the human body. She also documented fibers under a blacklight microscope flashing at each other like a form of communication, although that one is no longer on YouTube. Many Morgellons sufferers are finding quantum dots coming out of their skin lesions or in biofilm, along with other bizarre artifacts. I'm not sure to whom I should attribute the following information, but I found it somewhere along the way in my research. Quote, quantum dots are tiny man-made crystals. They are so small that you can't see them with a typical microscope. In fact, they're 10,000 times narrower than a human hair. That's incredibly small, but don't let their size fool you. Quantum dots are actually very powerful devices, and it's their size that gives them a unique ability to convert light into nearly any color in the visible spectrum with very high efficiency. Each quantum dot is actually a tiny semiconductor, which means it can convert incoming energy. The electronic characteristics of quantum dots are determined by their size and shape. This means that we can control the color of light given off by a quantum dot just by changing its size. Bigger dots emit longer wavelengths, like red, while smaller dots emit shorter wavelengths, like green. Think of a guitar string. When a guitar string is shortened, it produces a higher pitch, and when it is lengthened, it creates a lower pitch. The tune of a quantum dot, the wavelength of the light it emits, behaves in a similar way. Unquote. Many are also finding strange metallic hexagons coming out of their skin. Black goo, black oil, and programmable matter have been portrayed in a lot of movies, television shows like The X-Files, and even in commercials such as Lady Gaga's 5-minute film to promote her black fragrance called Fame, and completely satanic. Reference videos by Nicholson 1968 for more information on it. The information is now extensive. Nicholson also has a very good video on Morgellons that is well worth watching, titled The Battle for the Real Temple of God. Using my pocket microscope, I was able to film a strange black oily substance that came out of my skin when my wrist was accidentally pinched between magnets in a bracelet I was wearing. The skin broke and the black substance oozed out of the surface area of my skin. There was a black fiber in the wound that had broken in half, which clearly shows under high magnification, about 350x, that the fiber was actually clear and filled with this black substance, which spilled out of the fiber when it broke. The end of the black fiber is actually clear, not black at all. Many other Morgellons sufferers have experienced black sweat oozing out of their pores. This black goo seems to be associated with masses of black fibers. I had the opportunity to present these two of the photos to Dr. Garth Nicholson on his Facebook page, where I asked, quote, Dr. Nicholson, have you ever seen anything like this in your research? This fiber came out of my wrist and was accidentally pinched in half. You can see that it was actually a clear fiber filled with something black that I believe could possibly be mycoplasma, unquote. His response was, quote, actually you can't really tell from the picture what the contents are or how many different substances are in the fluids that appear to be coming from the structure, unquote. So I asked, but have you seen anything that looks like that coming out of a fiber? Unquote. His response was, not really. Another sufferer then asked, quote, Dr. Garth Nicholson, can you help us perhaps at all by researching some samples of our skin lesions, hair, etc.? I know that's a lot to ask, but there are so many suffering unbearably and spending everything they have only to stay sick, some committing suicide, unquote. His response was, quote, unfortunately, we can only test within an approved clinical trial at our institute. The IMM is a nonprofit research organization. It is not a clinic or practice. We can only see patients who are part of one of our clinical trials, and we do not have an open trial in this subject area. And he signed it, Professor Emeritus Garth Nicholson, PhD, MDH. This was in December 2016. However, in May of 2012, Dr. Nicholson sent this message, which Crystal River posted on the Limebusters chat board. Quote, although there are bacterial elements to Morgellons disease, it is certainly more complex than Lyme disease or mycoplasma, usually a co-infection in Lyme. Morgellons appears to have unusual elements of parasites and perhaps even insect elements. The fibers of some Morgellons patients have characteristics of chitin and insect material. Although the microorganisms involved have not yet been identified, I believe that Morgellons will ultimately be found to contain a complex array of different microorganisms. For example, Lyme disease is a complex mix of co-infections that include Borrelia, Mycoplasma, Babesia, Bartonella, Ehrlichia, etc. One of the Morgellons co-infections is likely to be Mycoplasma, in particular Mycoplasma fermentans, because Morgellons patients often have this co-infection, but that is far from the whole story. As other elements are discovered and confirmed, a rational approach for tradition, with my double vision, I have trouble reading. Start that again. As other elements are discovered and confirmed, a more rational approach for treatment will evolve. I have attached some general information on preventing transmission, etc. Signed, Professor Garth Nicholson, unquote. And he also still has a link to this document on his website. Notes on Morgellons syndrome disease. Contributors to this information, Cheryl Nichols, Professor Garth Nicholson, the Institute for Molecular Medicine, and the Morgellons Research Foundation. Revised patient information updated February 2nd, 2009, which is a PDF file clickable from the page. If you want to read it, just search for Garth Nicholson and Morgellons and you will find it if you scroll down the page. This blurb from the book, Project Daylily by Garth L. Nicholson, PhD, and Nancy L. Nicholson, PhD, the Institute for Molecular Medicine, is quite revealing on the subject of weaponized mycoplasmas. Quote, Project Daylily chronicles the events surrounding the Gulf War syndrome suffered by over 150,000 veterans and tens of thousands dead without proper acknowledgement or treatment to keep secret the origin of their illnesses. Were our armed forces exposed to chemical and biological toxins that were supplied in part by a sinister network of rogue bureaucrats, intelligence operatives, and scientists? This is the story of how one of these biological agents was found by 2 American scientists as part of a massive testing program, and how various academic and government employees did everything in their power to keep this information secret. Project Daylily is based on a true story. The authors wrote Project Daylily in order to shed light on a crisis facing our country and the world. A fictional format was used to maximize dramatic content. The events described are true, and the scientific principles discussed in the book have been documented in the author's publications, reports, and sworn testimony to presidential commissions and committees of the U.S. Congress. Project Daylily is dedicated to the memory of Dr. Fred Conrad, Colonel, U.S. Air Force retired, and 5 other academic colleagues who died under mysterious circumstances while investigating aspects of the alleged illegal testing of biological weapons in Texas hospitals, nursing homes, and prisons. This book is also dedicated to the men and women of our armed services and their family members who were put in harm's way and were never properly warned about the dangers of biological weapons, and to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice personnel and its prisoners, and to the people of the great state of Texas who were betrayed and lost their health and loved ones to a vicious agenda in the name of national security. Unquote. Harold Kautzvella has lectured extensively on the black goo phenomenon and has co-authored a book with Kara St. Louis titled Dangerous Imagination, Silent Assimilation. The predator-parasite agenda of using humans as a resource, essentials of newer research about Morgellons, DNA, RNA, biophoton, and optogenetics, and transhuman agendas, unquote. The blurb of the book says this is a partnership between Kara and Harold, who is an esoteric investigator with expertise in geology, physics, and the media. Together they plumb the depths of the social engineering which is aimed at the cultural destruction of Western civilization, and how chemtrails, Morgellons disease, and the phenomenon of black goo or sentient oil are the building blocks behind the elite's agenda to commandeer the world. On various YouTube videos, Harold speaks about technology that he says has been in place since 2003 and which directly alters the DNA, RNA structures within humans. This technology, which he says surpasses what he calls the black program, which manifests Morgellons, is dispersed via the covert aerosol spraying program, which many refer to as chemtrails. From a secular perspective, he also discusses how he believes the Matrix is managed by an alien artificial intelligence with a self-preservation objective, and about the elite's obsession with controlling and programming a substance called black goo, which he says mirrors the consciousness of humans and that of alien entities such as the Archons. I have seen videos and articles about the black cobblestone in Mecca claiming that it was stolen and missing for 21 years. Some are claiming the black stone is made up of the same substance as the black goo, and if so, it could explain the total control, fanatical mind control over the Muslims that have kissed or touched it over so many generations. In the same vein, I have read an article that says that the cobblestone has dwindled in size and broken into smaller pieces from all of the touching in the Hajjs, which is why it is now enclosed to protect it, and the worshippers are now supposed to just get close enough to point at it. Imagine a black substance that came down from the skies that could exert control over the minds of people. It is now being said that the same substance may have been found in the Falkland Islands, that the Falkland Islands War was not fought over land but over a deposit of this black goo substance. There are reports that the British government performed experiments on the substance and that it was tossed into the sewer system. There are also reports that 25 scientists from Marconi that were associated with that project all died mysteriously or in supposed accidents after the project ended. Now imagine this black goo dropped from airplanes all over the world in densely populated areas. What a nightmare. There are forces in the world that hate humanity and which are looking to, quote, master the human domain, as written on the original Jade Helm patch, and they will do anything to bring humanity under their full subjection and dominion. They do not want us to think for ourselves or obey the higher authority of God, and they deny our Savior Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Their God is Lucifer, the prince of the power of the air. He controls through his followers and puppets the airwaves, everything in the lower heaven, and most if not all of the technology used therein. Sunlight and vitamin D are essential to life, so these forces have devised a plan to block that life-giving energy through geoengineering while brainwashing most of humanity to believe that the sun is our enemy and that blocking it is good for our health. In actuality, they are killing the forests, our food supply, animal life, and humanity. To make things worse, they are heating up our atmosphere with HAARP and an estimated 72 ionospheric heaters around the world, which I have read can heat bubbles in the atmosphere to as much as 600 degrees Fahrenheit, creating a false global warming, weather warfare, and electromagnetic mind control, which they are now using in an attempt to take away our God-given right to life and freedom of will. For more information on HAARP, there is a very informative book titled Angels Don't Play This HAARP by Dr. Nick Begich and Jean Manning. Nikola Tesla once said, if you want to find the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. In regard to the hum many people are hearing, we live in a world that consists of both natural and supernatural elements. Based upon my personal experience with the hum, I have come to believe that it is a multidimensional phenomenon. We who hear it and other equally strange noises are hearing sounds from both the natural world and the supernatural realms that are normally beyond the range of human hearing. It has been estimated that as many as 1 in every 5 people are hearing sounds they don't comprehend, and many are asking questions. I am one of those people. Countless people around the world have reported hearing noises and feeling vibrations that none of the authorities seem to be able to explain, or they just don't want us to be aware of what the cause is, depending on their own level of understanding. Due to its haunting and pervasive qualities, people have begun to call it the hum. The hum has been reported in the news for many years, with as many as 2 to 10% of people in whole towns claiming they have been victimized by it. In an article by Jared Keller, published on Policy Mike, titled "A Mysterious Sound is Driving People Insane and Nobody Knows What's Causing It," Jared describes the sounds people are hearing. The hum refers to a mysterious sound heard in places around the world by a small fraction of a local population. It's characterized by a persistent and invasive low-frequency rumbling or droning noise, often accompanied by vibrations. While reports of unidentified humming sounds pop up in scientific literature dating back to the 1830s, modern manifestations of the contemporary hum have been widely reported by national media in the United Kingdom, the United States, and Australia since the early 1970s. Regional experiences of the phenomenon vary, and the hum is often prefixed with the region where the problem centers, like the Windsor hum in Ontario, Canada, the Taos hum in New Mexico, or the Auckland hum for Auckland, New Zealand. Somewhere between 2 and 10% of people can hear the hum, and inside isolation is no escape. Most sufferers find the noise to be more disturbing indoors and at night. Much to their dismay, the source of the mysterious humming is virtually untraceable. While the uneven experience of the hum in local populations had led some researchers to dismiss it as a mass delusion, the nuisance and pain associated with the phenomenon make delusion a dissatisfying hypothesis. Now follow me down the rabbit hole into a hidden world of evil causes and effects. Remember Through the Looking Glass in Alice in Wonderland? One pill makes you larger and one pill makes you small. Take the red pill or the blue pill. Vote Democrat or Republican. Everything is two-sided to make us believe we have choices and control when we really live in a matrix designed by the god, little g, of this world, Lucifer, and which we are not to be a part of, this world, until Christ returns. The hard part is discerning the truth when it is presented. Even Lucifer gives some truth, but twists it to meet his ends and distract us away from God and Jesus. People have been blinded by this temporary God of this world to the point where ignorance is bliss. Bliss comes from blindness and keeps you from knowing and understanding the truth of the danger we are all in, and true faith in the one true God and his Son, Jesus Christ. It is a device of Lucifer, as is luck, which is the opposite of faith and is derived from Lucifer. People may believe it is better to be ignorant of the truth, but it is blindness caused by Lucifer. The Bible says, quote, "In whom the God of this world hath blinded the minds of them which believe not, lest the light of the glorious gospel of Christ, who is the image of God, should shine unto them," unquote. 2 Corinthians 4:4, King James Version. Lucifer and his minions surround humanity with one distraction after another and create fear in our hearts. There is nothing to fear except fear itself. Be in the world, but not a part of it. Quote, "Fear thou not, for I am with thee. Be not dismayed, for I am thy God. I will strengthen thee, yea, I will help thee, yea, I will uphold thee with the right hand of my righteousness," unquote. That's Isaiah 41:10, King James Version. It is the Babylonian system created by Lucifer to control humanity. We must all wake up from the matrix before it is too late. I first became aware of the hum in June of 2012. I live on a park with an open skyline extending north. There is no machinery or industrial complex anywhere near where I live to account for it. What I hear is actually more than a hum. It seems to be a layered sound and initially feels like being on top of a motor that is a mix of revs and grinds. On top of that is a strange whirring, which reminds me of the sound one might expect to hear while flying inside of a spaceship, which gives an eerie, unsettled feeling. There is another underlying sound like a low modulated bass that changes in frequency from slow and steady to fast and frenzied. With it all is an inner vibration that can be felt through the bottom of the feet all the way up through the body, sometimes slightly and other times enough to make me feel like I could lose my balance, which I have on many occasions and even broke bones in the process, or fall through the floor, almost leaving my body altogether. It gives me the feeling of being unfixed in time and space. It is interesting to note that if a person were to hear these sounds and vibrations while strapped to a table in a dark room or a mock-up of a spaceship, one might get the impression that they were actually on a spacecraft flying somewhere. When the sound levels build, they intensify to a crescendo of sound, building a wall of pressure in my head and around my heart, sometimes leaving me breathless and/or with a headache. At times it reminds me of the buzz of thousands of cicadas rising to a crescendo, then falling back to a lower vibration, and then rising back up over and over again, but the cadence is different. I've also noticed that my hearing is affected at these times. It seems to block out the higher sound levels. Sometimes I actually hear sounds like an open microphone in a large empty room. Lately, I've been hearing what sounds like a large bass drum being beat, going bam, 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 bam for hours on end, especially when I'm trying to sleep, and it gets louder during the night. Sometimes it sounds like a huge army marching in step, or swords clashing on shields, or even large crowds murmuring. It isn't all of the time, thank God. There is some respite from it, and I only hear it when I am at home, or in areas where there is a Wi-Fi hub, satellite dish, or Quen tower. It is definitely not tinnitus or ringing of the ears. Actually, I've read that part before. Okay. A lot of the people that I have spoken to over the past few years who have Morgellons disease syndrome are also claiming to hear EMF and feel the vibrations that accompany them. There is definitely a connection between EMF and Morgellons. In my opinion, it is a psychotronic warfare. Those people who can hear the sounds and vibrations of the waves are becoming aware of something supernatural going on in the world that is not of God. God would not torment mankind in such a way, but Satan, being the prince of the power of the air, would do so with glee. Some people have committed suicide to avoid living with these sounds and vibrations, manifestations, and many people have gone mad because they do not understand what is happening to them or how to find the peace of Christ in the face of them. Even when you do gain an understanding, it is hard to live with it. You have to keep your mind focused on God and keep it occupied so they can't affect you adversely. On October 19, 2004, I suffered an episode of smoke inhalation, the third that summer thanks to my neighbor's reckless actions, which turned into a severe bacterial infection in my lungs. I was very ill, and my immune system was badly compromised, resulting in an allergy to antibiotics. I tried to care for myself, thinking that my chronic bronchitis had become acute, something that I had dealt with many times over the years. It got to the point where I could barely get out of my bed. I made an appointment and went to see a medical doctor on December 10, 2004. He immediately put me on a nebulizer with liquid albuterol, and I coughed a lot of fluid out of my lungs. My doctor told me I had a bad infection and was very concerned. He sent me to see a pulmonary specialist in the building next door to his office, who, after checking me out, called an ambulance and sent me to the emergency room at St. Vincent's Hospital. I was there for about 11 hours on an IV, antibiotics, oxygen, and a nebulizer before they released me, and I went home. I picked up a nebulizer and was confined to bed for months, feeling like I was near death's door. I had been diagnosed with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD. I was also given prescriptions for 3 different inhalers, albuterol inhaler, and ampules of liquid for the nebulizer, Advair, and Spiriva. I went back to the specialist on December 24th, 2004 for a follow-up visit, still feeling miserable and very weak. Again, he sent me to the emergency room. I was supposed to be admitted to the hospital, but they wouldn't admit me without talking to my doctor first, who had already left the office for the holidays. I was put on oxygen and antibiotics again for several hours, and when I was stabilized, they sent me home again. I was forced to move into the living room and sleep on a convertible sofa bed so as not to disturb my husband's sleep with all of my coughing and having to use the nebulizer to clear fluid from my lungs in the middle of the night. Due to the illness, I slept for very short periods of time. I hovered near death's door for several months during that period of time. And I also reacted very badly to the antibiotics. I mention this episode again because I had a very frightening experience during this time, which led to a later episode that I feel is related to why I am now hearing the hum. While I was lying in bed near death's door, I saw the hazy image of a person standing at the foot of my bed dressed all in black. At first I thought it was my husband, who was sleeping in the bedroom, checking up on me, but I knew he didn't own any of the type of clothing worn by the apparition. I called out John's name, but he did not speak to me. Then I thought maybe it was death waiting for me to pass on so he could spirit my soul away. I looked more intensely at the figure and thought he looked a lot like our next-door neighbor who had passed away in his apartment, the same apartment that soon after his death had caused my smoke inhalation problems, not too long before the new neighbors had moved in. I never knew his name, although I had seen him in the hall on a few occasions. I keep thinking his name was Louis, but I'm not sure, so I will use Louis for the sake of this telling. After Louis' passing, I began to hear some strange noises in our apartment at night, which I thought at first was just the building settling. This soon escalated to a little bit of poltergeist activity, like a can jumping off the middle of a shelf when no one was near it, a pot holder coming off a hook in the kitchen and landing in the middle of the floor while we were asleep, or a timer for the light on my bird's cage falling out of the receptacle and landing a yard away from the wall plug, which was less than a foot above the floor, and firmly plugged in. Sometimes things would be moved or disappear and reappear somewhere else. Sometimes I even heard the sound of knee joints cracking, which I thought fit with a very old man trying to walk around with arthritis. As this black-clad ghostly figure stood there silently watching me, I came to believe it was Louis, and then it was him that I heard creeping around and moving things at night, being mischievous or trying to get my attention. My husband was a sound sleeper and never seemed to hear what I was hearing. I suspect he didn't know what to make of it. I got into the habit of thinking it was Louis every time I heard or saw something out of place. I would tell my husband, Louis is at it again." When I was recovered enough to get out of bed and go about my daily affairs, I put it behind me, thinking that Louis probably wasn't happy hanging out in his old apartment with the new neighbors, who I wasn't so happy with either. They were the same ones who had filled my apartment with smoke on 3 different occasions and nearly ended my existence. They didn't even care about what they had done to me, although I have finally come to the point where I have been able to forgive them. I let the incident with the black ghostly figure drift to the back of my mind and went on with my life until several years later in June of 2012. While reading my Bible, it dawned on me that there are no ghosts of humans on the earth, but familiar spirits, demons impersonating people who have died in order to convince people of their false doctrines and to lead them astray. Quote, For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing. They have no further reward, and even their name is forgotten. Their love, their hate, and their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. Unquote, Ecclesiastes 9:5-6, King James Version. The Bible teaches in the book of Genesis that evil spirits are fallen angels, or Nephilim, and the disembodied spirits of their giant children, known as Rephaim, which being half angel and half human, became demons in the afterlife, hating humanity because they can never enter the kingdom of God. They purposely set out to defile the DNA of humanity, animals, and plants in an effort to ruin God's creation and the bloodline that would lead to the birth of God's Son, Jesus Christ, and the redemption of man from his fallen state, brought about by the serpent in the Garden of Eden. This resulted in the judgment of God and the worldwide flood, which killed everything on the earth except for Noah and his family and the animals on the ark. Satan delights in deceiving people into believing that there are alternatives to life everlasting other than heaven and hell, such as pretending to be aliens from outer space, promising life without God through genetic DNA manipulation, cloning or transhuman technologies, or impersonating loved ones or other people who have passed away with so-called unfinished business on earth. He and his evil followers work hard to make people complacent about life after death and their rightful place in God's eternal plan for us. In researching the Bible, it suddenly became clear to me that while there are clearly spirit beings, both good and evil, there are no human spirits that can haunt the living. Satan and his demons are able to tap into the spiritual Akashic record and impersonate anyone they want to. The next time I heard the noises in my apartment, I was lying on my bed trying to fall asleep. By a supernatural stirring of my spirit, I was led to say out loud, quote, "I know you are not the ghost of Lewis. I know you are a demon," unquote. At that moment, the demon manifested itself as a huge inky black entity with very large piercing eyes, but otherwise totally devoid of light, hovering over my bed with shadowy tendrils flowing out from his form, reaching out arms toward me. I let out a blood-curdling scream loud enough to wake my husband, who was asleep in the other room, and brought him running out to see what was going on. He is a heavy sleeper and normally would not have heard me. I was so frightened that I began sleeping with the light on and started praying a lot more than I had ever done before. I was very shaken by the incident and prayed for God and Jesus to protect me and my husband and to send the demon back to where it had come from. Ironically, within a few days of this prayer, during the early morning hours, I was reading the Bible when I heard a loud, piercing, demonic growl coming through the wall of my neighbor's apartment. The next day I noticed they had placed a large white cross on their door handle, and not long after this they moved out of the building. Needless to say, this whole incident caused me to rethink my relationship with God and Jesus. Because I have been so wrong about the demon being Lewis, I prayed fervently to God, asking for forgiveness and for the gift of discernment so I would be able to tell the difference between good and evil entities. God answered my prayer, but not in the way that I expected. Leading up to my realization that Lewis's spirit was actually a demon was another incident that had taken place earlier the same month. I was getting out of bed when I felt a disc in my lower back slip forward. I got out of bed with a great deal of difficulty and barely made my way to the bedroom closet where I had a pair of crutches from an earlier event when I had arthroscopic surgery on my left knee. Around 1984, I had been diagnosed with degenerative disc disease in my back. So on occasion, my back would give me problems, but nothing as bad as I had felt that morning. I actually used the crutches to walk around my apartment for about a week. Around this time, I happened upon a video on YouTube about awakening the Kundalini energy in the spine and had a fleeting thought that it might help to alleviate the pain. So I listened to the video while the speaker talked about the process. Amazingly, the pain was alleviated. I felt the bones snap back into position and my back felt stronger. I was amazed and did not realize that I had just made a huge mistake. When I asked God for the gift of discernment shortly after that, I felt in my spirit that I needed to repent of that awakening, so I did repent and asked God to forgive my ignorance. I have subsequently found out that there are 33 vertebrae in the human spine which could correlate to the 33 degrees of Freemasonry. Kundalini is a serpent energy or power said to reside coiled around the base of the human spine and to travel upward through the spinal cord and the chakras or energy centers to the crown of the head, supposedly releasing that energy. It can also move in the opposite direction down to your sexuality, and that way leads to depravity and enslavement to Lucifer. Some people are under the mistaken belief that Morgellons symptoms represent Kundalini ascension because the sounds and the vibrations, but it is a false belief. I had Morgellons way before I listened to that video, and Kundalini does not cause disease in the body. It is supposed to clear it. Morgellons is not demon possession either. They are total opposites, but they are both demon influenced in different ways. Another mistake I had made was to purchase an orgonite pendant after reading that orgonite would protect against the particles distributed in chemtrails and clear the sky over my home. These were New Age activities, but I didn't realize their impact would be very negative to my spirit. Healing comes through God, Jesus, and His Holy Spirit, and I had been hurting for so long that I had failed to recognize that my desperation was leading me away from God. People need to consider the idea that gifting of orgonite may be helping to energize the very towers and things that they think are disarming. If the sky clears up over the area where they gifted or placed the orgonite towers, where does the toxic mix in the sky go to? It drops out of the sky on them and on everything all around the tower. It doesn't magically disappear. I found out the hard way that orgonite energy, once activated, does not appear to turn off. I purchased an orgonite pendant because I read how it was supposed to disperse the chemtrails and clear the skies. We were sprayed here quite a lot, and I had begun to see a connection between chemtrails and Morgellons. I wore it for about a month. During that period, I noticed that my body began to vibrate lightly. At first, a not unpleasant experience, and for a short time it felt like I was regaining energy in my body. It built up to a point where I could see how people could be deceived into believing that their bodies were beginning to transcend this plane of existence. For a short period of time, I began to think that maybe the New Age beliefs were a possibility, until I went back and looked further into the orgonite and noticed for the first time that they were claiming that orgonite would allow you to see entities. I then suddenly felt a very strong jolt to my spirit, like you would feel when you are in a dangerous situation and all of your senses are very acute. A feeling I had experienced before. I realized that none of these teachings reference Jesus Christ as the Son of God who died for our sins. It made me very frightened that, out of curiosity, I had been listening to some of the New Age videos on YouTube about the coming of alien beings and the Intergalactic Federation of Light, which I normally would not have done. I was shocked when I heard that it was not important to worship Jesus, that he was just one of them aboard their ship above the earth. Those videos invariably have a hypnotic quality to them. It was also very alarming when the sensation of vibrations began to increase to the point where I felt that I was disassociating from my body. I could feel them through the floor of our apartment. My body physically began to shake while I was standing in line one day at the post office. I knew it wasn't my imagination because my hands were shaking and I could not stop them from doing so. People standing in line near me noticed the shaking. I could see them staring at my hands. The funny thing is that I didn't hear any sounds up to that point, just felt the vibrations. When I got home, I took off the orgonite pendant and threw it away. The shaking let up to some degree, and the sound vibrations lessened for a short time. Soon after, I prayed to God to give me the gift of discernment. I began to hear the low bass harmonics coupled with the vibrations. When I first started to feel fully the effects of the EMF waves that summer, I mistakenly thought it was the demon trying to torment me, but I soon realized after a lot of prayer that it was just that God had opened my spiritual senses and allowed me to discern something very evil that is happening throughout the world, but especially in heavily populated areas. Since the EMF waves tend to interfere with thought processes and affect sleep cycles by suppressing melatonin levels in the area of the pineal gland, I have resolved the sleep issues by prayer and the use of 30 milligrams of melatonin a half hour before I go to bed. Based upon my own experience, EMF can trigger problems with blood pressure or may cause heart failure in undiagnosed heart patients due to lack of sleep or high stress levels that result from experiencing these low electromagnetic frequencies. I was diagnosed with cardiac arrhythmia in December of 1999 after a minor heart attack and was subject to bouts of angina for which I carried around nitroglycerin tablets to keep it under control. Between the heart medications, high blood pressure medicines, COPD medicines and inhalers, and the collapsed immune system along with the Morgellons and an arm I had broken in 4 places, I was in sorry shape the summer of 2012. I had so many health-related problems that I finally decided to put my life fully into God's hands and quit taking all of the medicines. It was a huge leap of faith, and I prayed daily to God for direction. I have not turned back. I use only natural healing and prayer now. It didn't take long for me to notice that the EMF waves would intensify at times, even when I was lying down on my bed. One night I was looking out over the park, and the EMF waves began to intensify to the point where it felt like the whole floor was shaking under my feet as I sat working in my office. The sound waves crescendoed and the tempo changed completely. At the same time, I felt pressure building up in my head, and my heart began to race. A few seconds later, a very large triangular aircraft flew silently and low over my building, heading north over Van Cortlandt Park. It banked off toward the east, following the tree line on a direct course toward Montauk Point and Camp Hero, passing right over the area of Brookhaven Labs and the Pine Barrens of Long Island. If you look on a map of New York, you will see that if you draw a line between Van Cortlandt Park and Montauk Point, it is pretty much a straight line from west to east. Not only did it not appear to be a traditional airplane-type craft, it made no physical sound as it flew over. It was just a fluke that when the EMF waves picked up that I was looking out of my window and saw it. It had 3 bright white lights, one on each corner and one red one in the middle at the back of the craft. I didn't have a working camera at the time, but eventually bought a small flip pocket video camera and have caught images of other similar craft, which I posted in a short video on my YouTube page. Sometimes a bright white light would flash on top of the craft, and sometimes it seemed to have 2 large headlights when seen from the front of it, and seemed like it could fly both forward and backward or sit still in the sky. Of course, they may be different types of craft, but all are triangular in shape. I sat there for a moment in utter disbelief until I realized that the vibrations and hum had seemed to lose intensity after it passed over and then re-intensified. The craft was followed shortly after by a black helicopter which appeared to be flying closely behind it. The helicopter sounded like it was faster than the normal traffic helicopter which tended to fly over the park to monitor traffic on the major Deegan Highway, and it was black as well. Strangely, as I sat there trying to digest what I had seen, I saw at least 35 aircraft and helicopters fly over the park silently during the next hour, one at a time, with about 20 seconds between each one, heading in the same direction. I wasn't watching the whole time, so there may have been more of them. I was wishing that I had a movie camera to document it, but unfortunately did not. I told my husband what I was seeing, but he showed no interest. He cannot hear the EMF waves or feel the effects. Later on, he saw one when I videotaped it over the Key Food grocery store parking lot in November of 2012. My husband and I live in a double building shaped like a huge H. We live in the recessed area on the inner left corner in the front of that building, facing north to Van Cortlandt Park, on the bar of the H that joins the 2 buildings together. It is a brick and stone building with concrete walls and ceilings. Its foundation is constructed with steel girders and rebar. There is a huge satellite dish about 12 feet in diameter on the roof, 4 floors over us. Our living room wall is directly under one edge of the satellite dish. Our apartment was also wired for satellite when we once had direct TV, and we switched back to cable, but those wires are still throughout our apartment, and now Verizon has placed wiring in the wall outside where I sleep. We are wired for sound. I bought an electromagnetic radiation detector and went around my apartment checking everything electronic, and found that I only picked up the electromagnetic waves by my computer and the one phone base by my bed. Not the phone itself, but the base wired to the wall for recharging it. Also, it's right next to where Verizon put in their new wiring. Ironically, we have 4 of these, and only the one next to my bed emanates electromagnetic energy. I changed to a different base and still got the same readings. I have concluded that they are coming from the wiring in that area of the apartment, which was right next to where Verizon came into our building and dug a channel in the hall wall to put in their FiOS wiring. We have cable vision, but nothing is coming from either television, both smart TVs, or from the cable box. The computer and wireless connections both have high readings, but my husband's tablet picks up nothing. I have become convinced that I have a bioelectric field has increased, that the bioelectric field has increased, because when I point at myself there are strong readings that just keep fluctuating, but nothing where I pointed at my husband. I firmly believe that the source of the sound and vibrations is demonic, even though the machines involved may be man-made and operated. Some of these machines are from fallen angel technology transmitted to people such as Nikola Tesla, who claimed to get psychic emanations from Mars, and Werner von Braun, who claimed he had help from aliens as well. The men directing these projects are clearly under the control of demonic forces, whether they are aware of it or not. Why else would they use such destructive forces against their fellow man? Even their own families are victims. They are performing destructive and devastating experiments without permission of the people being experimented upon. Fallen angel technology has been bestowed upon humanity in the guise of alien technology. It is supposed to make life easier, but instead has caused addictions to it and depersonalization of relationships. It has already been proven in scientific studies that cell phones can cause brain cancer through transmission of radio frequency waves, yet people walk around practically enslaved to their iPhones and galaxies, etc. I know about depersonalization from other things that have happened in my life, so I stay away from the traps of addiction to anything. I walked through the dark night of the soul and survived it. When I was a child, I felt trapped in a violent, unloved world. My stepfather was an alcoholic wife beater and a child abuser. I was beat so hard and screamed so loud that on one occasion neighbors actually came over to our house and tried to intervene. My stepfather threatened them for interfering and they went away. I once saw him punch my mother in the stomach when she was pregnant with my sister. As a result of the brutality of my stepfather, I began searching for a means of escape. My first attempt was to run away from home. I needed to get away from there for my health and sanity. The police caught me about 10 miles down the road and took me right back home. My mother was forced to work at 2 jobs because my stepfather drank up his paychecks. Being the oldest, I was left with the duties of caring for my brothers and sisters, as well as doing most of the household chores, cooking, and taking care of my siblings. On top of that, I still had to go to school, do homework, and held down an after-school job taking care of 5 girls for a neighbor, feeding them dinner, giving them baths, and doing laundry for extra money. My stepfather took that money away from me and drank it up too. I was so tired all the time that I kept falling asleep at school. When I reached the age of 13, I gave up trying to run away and took some of my mother's sleeping pills, which I had stumbled across while cleaning their room. Subconsciously, I didn't really want to die, but I needed them to understand the pain I was in so they would take off some of the pressure. It wasn't the smartest thing I ever did, but I was suffering from nervous exhaustion and on the edge of a breakdown. I could not handle all of the responsibility they had laid upon me. My mother rushed me to the hospital, praying for me to live. Until this moment, I had very little concept of God. While in the Naval Hospital Intensive Care Unit, I was unconscious for more than 12 hours and actually died. My heart stopped beating for 3 minutes. During this time, I have a very clear memory of watching the doctor and nurses trying to start my heart beating again. I suddenly realized that my spirit had dissociated from my body and was floating above the scene, observing their efforts. Suddenly I was back in my body and the vision was gone. Just before they succeeded in bringing life back into my body, I remember a feeling of extreme peace and then of resistance. I did not want to return to the physical shell that housed my being, but the hand of God intervened and gave me another chance to fulfill the destiny that He had in mind for my life. At that time, I made a promise to God that I would never attempt suicide again, and I never did. I walked out of that hospital with the knowledge that life after death was real, and this is where I began my long search for the God and the truth. For God and the truth. This was one of my many near-death experiences, and each one left an impact on my life. Right after that, I became interested in writing and felt driven to write about my life. Writing was cathartic for me. It always has been. Interestingly, right after that experience, I started dreaming about flying, another way of escaping, but did not fully realize that I was leaving my body in my sleep. I went through a lot of traumatic experiences while still living with my family. Too much to mention here, but suffice it to say, I ended up out on my own when I was 14, suffered a bad marriage at 16, and took a bus to New York City when I was 17 with only $10 in my pocket and very little else. On a beautiful summer morning in 1969, I had an experience that plunged me into spiritual darkness for some time. I found a very old man dressed in rags lying on the sidewalk, moaning piteously. He had a huge gash on his forehead and was bleeding profusely. I tried to get help for him, but no one would help me. I couldn't even get an ambulance to come because I didn't have the money to pay for it. He died with his head cradled in my lap. I didn't even know his name. He was just a destitute old wino that no one seemed to care about. Money was more important than a man's life. A hard lesson learned. I sat there holding his lifeless body, crying sad tears and wondering why it had to be this way. Then I got angry at the heartlessness I had seen, angry about the pitiful death of this poor old man, and angry about my helplessness to do anything about it. My heart was breaking, and I even began to question the existence of God. The darkness encompassed me and took many years to disperse. After that experience, I started reading and studying different religions and philosophies, narrowly avoiding the Church of Scientology, the Moonies, the Hare Krishnas, visited a yogi with a friend who was heavily into yoga, and many others. These were all snares of the human soul, tempting, but somehow, by the grace of God, I avoided getting fully ensnared. During the dark days of my soul, I also read the Urantia book, the Pistis Sophia, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Akankar, and many others. Due to memories of my experience being out of body when I was 13, I began to explore soul traveling as taught in the Book of Akankar. I never joined the cult, but I did study the book. I found the subject quite fascinating and found myself out of body on numerous occasions. I even had an experience where I turned up at a friend's door in my spirit body and somehow rang the bell. He came to the door with a look of surprise on his face and took a good hard look at my ghostly apparition before I faded away back to my body. I thought it was a dream until he told me that he saw me and it had frightened him. He thought I was dead. Soon I began having all kinds of strange things happening to me, but I did not yet realize that my spiritual life was in jeopardy. Little did I know that I was going to experience yet another earth-shattering trauma in 1971, this time as a result of my dabbling with out-of-body travel. I went to sleep one night feeling relatively secure. Underneath, hidden in my subconsciousness, I was really a bundle of raw nerves. So much had happened to me over the years that my self-respect was all but gone. As I sank down into a deep, exhausted sleep, my consciousness level shifted. I drifted out of my body unexpectedly. There was a strong breeze billowing behind the curtains in the window, which was always closed and locked at night due to being right off the sidewalk in New York City. It gave me the same type of feeling that you get when you watch an old horror film just before the spirits of the dead make their appearance during a seance and the doors would blow open. I was extremely alarmed to see the curtains blowing and thinking the window had been opened by a possible intruder, so I climbed out of bed, dreaming or sleepwalking, I did not know for sure, heading for the window to close it. The apartment was very small and I could see all the way through, but no one was there that I could see. As I did this, I suddenly realized it was very dark, and I remember wondering how I could see anything without turning on the light. Being very nearsighted, I was surprised to see anything clearly without my glasses. Arriving at the window, I reached out to pull it closed, only to discover that the glass seemed to be gone. My hand had passed through the glass as if it wasn't there. Totally confused, I reached for the phone to call for help, but I was unable to lift the receiver. I had a passing thought that I might be hallucinating, but quickly dismissed it as I headed for the door with the intention of awakening the building super. I passed through the door as if it wasn't there. It was frightening, and my hackles were raised. I looked up and down the hallway only to find that all of the doors and windows had seemed to vanish. There was a gale-force wind blowing through the entire building, making the corridors difficult to traverse. I could not feel the ground below my feet and flew from one apartment to the other, desperately looking for help, to no avail. I couldn't find a single blessed soul anywhere. I felt kind of like waking up to find that you're the last person left on the earth with no knowledge of how it happened. Suddenly, I sensed an overwhelmingly evil presence chasing after me, and fear went through me like a huge jolt of electricity. A fear that I was in a battle to save my soul flashed like an intuition across my mind. I could not see this presence, but I somehow knew that I would have seen it if I had had the courage to turn around and face my pursuer. It felt like the touch of a cold steel blade held against my skin and touching me everywhere at once. I heard a small whispering voice tell me that my soul was in jeopardy as I raced through the building trying to escape, screaming at the top of my lungs for help. Try as I might, not a single sound escaped my lips. I headed back into my apartment, my safe haven, and the presence gaining on my heels. An icy cold breath was caressing the entire length of my spine, chilling me to the depths of my soul. It scared the hell out of me. As I bent down over my bed to switch on the light, I saw my body lying there looking shriveled and devoid of life. For a brief moment, I thought I was dead and caught in some kind of limbo with the devil trying to take away my soul. I was so shocked by the sight that I was unaware of the transition when I found myself again lying on the bed looking up. Shaking all over, I thanked God for saving me from a horrible nightmare. The light was still off, so I reached up to turn it on, but my hand went right through it. Then I was sure it was not a dream and that it was not yet over. I tried to sit upright, but I could not move a muscle. My body felt cold and clammy. In my fear, I called out loud to God, praying with every fiber of my being for this nightmare to be over. I vowed to change my life for the better, if only it would end. Suddenly I saw a brilliant white light that enveloped my entire body with a blanket of warmth. I felt a tingling sensation, then mobility returned to my limbs. I reached up again to turn on the light, and the room filled with light. The supernatural light that freed my limbs from bondage disappeared along with the demonic presence. Returning to the present, it has been a long journey through the Morgellons maze, but I believe I have hit the end of that road, if not the end, then very close to it. Again, I am a victim of Morgellons, not a doctor. These are my observations and results from my own research. I have had this disease, as far as I can tell, for at least 12 years now, although it has now been nearly 5 years since I realized I had it. Everything I have done to this point has been helpful and brought me a long way toward ultimate healing. Since November of 2015, when I started on GCMAF yogurt, it has helped me to rebuild my immune system, cleanse the buildup in my colon, and made me more regular after many years of gut problems. I used it for 6 months with excellent results. Then I switched for a while, for monetary reasons, to making Bulgarian yogurt and supplementing with symbiotics colostrum with lactoferrin. When I do that, I also use Pearls Immune with lactoferrin, and together these seem to have a similar effect as the GCMAF yogurt, while costing a lot less. And I take at least 10,000 units of vitamin D3. I do switch off and on back to the GCMAF yogurt as I can afford to, because I seem to do much better with it. My own hair, which was completely clear and smooth like fiber optic cable, has begun to grow back normally, and the pigment has returned to it. My fingernails are now growing strong, and there are no more fibers embedded in them. I seem to have become more resistant to the chemtrail residues, which are still being sprayed all over my neighborhood on an almost daily basis. After much research, I added cat's claw liquid extract, Usnea liquid extract, astragalus liquid extract, serapeptase, and lipid replacement therapy to my daily regimen. Sorry about that phone ringing. Where was I? Okay. After much research, I added cat's claw liquid extract, Usnea liquid extract, astragalus liquid extract, serapeptase, and lipid replacement therapy to my daily regimen. The reasons I have added these things to my regimen are that cat's claw is being used to kill some strains of mycoplasma. Usnea dissolves biofilm to release the pathogens so the immune system can attack them. Astragalus attacks the pathogens as they are released. Serapeptase breaks down the toxins and dead tissues in the body, including biofilm sacs, and seems to push it out through the skin. Lipid replacement therapy helps to rebuild the damaged cellular structure and replaces the lipids destroyed by the mycoplasma, which is recommended by Dr. Garth Nicholson, who is also a victim of Gulf War syndrome. I decided to start using GCMAF yogurt after reading about Dr. Jeffrey Bradstreet and other doctors who were huge proponents of GCMAF, having their offices raided by the US FDA, United States Food and Drug Agency. All of their research, patient histories, and supplies were confiscated. Then shortly after, the doctors died in unusual ways, so I wanted to know more about it. Dr. Bradstreet was getting ready to make a major announcement about his success treating children with autism, reportedly about 85% success rate, using GCMAF, or globulin component macrophage activating factor. GCMAF is a natural part of the immune system. Macrophages are large, specialized white blood cells that are essential in maintaining a healthy immune system. They are formed and activated in response to an infection or accumulation of damaged or dead cells. Basically, they recognize, engulf, and destroy target cells. Some of the other doctors were using it to cure cancer and other autoimmune diseases. There is a very interesting video on YouTube titled "Cancer Cells Destroyed by First Immune GCMAF" that shows GCMAF macrophages attacking and destroying cancer cells via microscopes and time-lapse photography. It was reported that Dr. Bradstreet supposedly shot himself in the chest before his huge announcement was to be made. His body was found floating in the Broad River in Chimney Rock, North Carolina. His family and many other people who knew him claimed that there's no way that he would have committed suicide. How does a man shoot himself to death and then jump into a river by himself? Not only are doctors leading this type of research dying under strange circumstances, they are being routinely raided and shut down by the US FDA. They are then treated like criminals and their reputations are smeared. On top of that, the manufacturing facility in Europe was shut down and GCMAF in its pure form was banned. Think about this. Being natural to the human body, GCMAF is not patentable. There are major companies who would view GCMAF as a major threat to their profit margins, and most especially those in the pharmaceutical industry, pretty much all owned by the elites. The cancer treatment, cancer drug and vaccination, manufacturing industries, and more. They have billions and billions of dollars on the line. Another thing is, when you realize that geoengineering or chemtrails is blocking the sun, which produces the vitamin D in our bodies, is it any wonder that our immune systems are taking such a beating? The FDA can't ban the individual natural ingredients that make up GCMAF yogurt, at least not yet. But they will not allow the mixed ingredients to be sold in the U.S. or call it GCMAF yogurt on the label. They have recently approved kits that separate all of the ingredients that need to be made at home, which is Bravo yogurt, which is the only one that has 42 different strains of probiotics. This yogurt has been assayed to have the same effect as the refined GCMAF. When I realized that GCMAF is a natural part of the human body that can help to rebuild the immune system, I became even more interested, as you can imagine. It is the binding agent for vitamin D, which is essential to combat immune deficiency. There is a protein called nagalase that inhibits the ability of GCMAF to do its normal job. Nagalase is made by cancer cells and viruses. It blocks the production of GCMAF in the body, effectively preventing the macrophages that are still in the body from being activated, and also stops the vitamin D from doing its job of healthy DNA replication because it is not binding with the white blood cell macrophages. There is new evidence that has been published that nagalase has been added to vaccinations. I started using GCMAF yogurt in November of 2015. Within a few weeks, the black fibers and lumps around my ankles had all but disappeared, and the large lump or nodule about the size of a pea that had been on my inner thigh for months had disappeared. My very pale skin began to look more healthy. I was sold. Pretty much all of the black and white fibers have completely disappeared from my biofilm samples. In fact, the production of biofilm is almost completely gone. I ran some experiments using my biofilm in hydrogen peroxide, and it all appears to be dead, bubbling up and separating the biofilm, then turning white with no activity. I used it because other people have been reporting explosive growth of fibers under the use of hydrogen peroxide. Our skin is the largest illuminating organ in our body. The debris created by Morgellons and the pathogenic biofilm exits through the skin. When the biofilm dries up and exits, it feels like hard shards or forms hard nodules, which are seemingly fiber incubators underneath the skin that need to be broken down. My friend Candy Nelson took some amazing photos of nodules that came out of her skin, and even one underneath the scab that, when left alone for a time, a mass of white fibers actually grew out of it. It creates pressure on the skin from the inside and protrudes high enough above the surface of the skin that it can be seen. Another friend, Sherry O'Shea, also takes unusual photos. The one that intrigues me the most is of a fiber that appears to be full of fluid and belled out in the middle of the fiber. Another looks like a strange-looking demonic eye. And I have another one now that shows fibers growing underneath her scab when she removed it from a lesion. This protocol has given my body a fighting chance against the daily onslaught of Morgellons and reduced and/or removed the majority of my symptoms. It is a long, slow process to eliminate the matrix that the Morgellons pathogens create underneath the skin, and for a time it can cause a Herxheimer effect, making you feel worse before you feel better. More is not better. Slow and easy wins the race. Patience is needed. It is an ongoing process because the attack is still going on. The environment is filled with the causatives and fibers, and they will try to reestablish in your body if you let your guard down. Once you have Morgellons, your life will be changed forever. There is more to my protocol, including what I use and or have used to treat my hair, eyes, sinuses, ears, and skin, along with some of my research as to why I use and or use them on my Facebook page under notes. The only other thing is that all true healing comes from God. It is He who has directed me to find the natural way to bring the Morgellons that I've been fighting for years under control. I pray that all of those who hear this will open yourselves up to God's Holy Spirit and let His Holy Spirit guide you to healing. We each heal in our own way, and we each have different components of the disease. We do not all suffer the same co-infections or pathogens, but we do all have the synthetic DNA fibers in our systems. Don't lose hope. There are things you can do to fight it. In summary, my research has brought me to the conclusion that we who have Morgellons are all infected with weaponized mycoplasma that destroys the cells and immune system, along with nagalase, which suppresses the macrophages that fight disease in the human body. Nagalase has been found in a lot of vaccines, along with trace amounts of mycoplasma. On top of that, we are ingesting foods that have been genetically altered, sprayed with chemtrails proven to contain a variety of DNA-changing components, including insect vectors, cyanobacteria, synthetic DNA, and heavy metals, and more. And we live in an electromagnetic prison that activates these things in our bodies, producing all types of strange artifacts, fibers, pulsing lights, black goos, and more.